Dennis Nunn from Lincoln, Nebraska.
Great. Well, Pete, thanks for having us down here. We appreciate the opportunity to just talk a little bit about the Conklin ag products. My background is I grew up on a farm in southeast Nebraska, a little bitty town of Ohio, Nebraska. I don't know how big Pearl City is, but my hometown is about 160. I used to brag to my wife when we started dating that I graduated in the top 10 of my class until she found out there was only 8 of us. That really impressed her. But what happened is in 1970 I went to the University of Nebraska. When I was down there, I studied ag, animal science and ag econ, and about the time I was going into my graduate program, I came in contact with the Conklin Company, and we had started using some of their products in our farming operation. And so I got started working with them on a part-time basis while I was in graduate school, and then went full-time with them when I graduated back in 1975. So been 38 years I've been associated with the company, and what we've seen over those years is a lot of things develop in the Conklin ag line. And so what I'm going to do is try to capsulize as much as I can in a short period of time to give you kind of an overview of the Conklin ag products and the company as a whole. How many of you in here have used any ag products from the Conklin Company? Just to give me an idea. Okay, a few of you. Great. Well, what I'm going to try to do is I'll also share some 2012 data with you from some of our field plots, and then I'm going to try to set Jerry up so that he can kind of share with you what he's done as his operation, and specifically an NCG yield competition and with his full farm average. So, you know, Jerry and I put on a lot of miles this week. He put on 780 miles on Monday, coming from Cape Girardeau out to western Nebraska. We've been doing meetings across Nebraska. Last night in Iowa, now we're in Illinois, we'll be in Wisconsin tonight. So I appreciate Jerry so much for being willing to come out here and share with guys what his results have been with all of his farming operation. Anyway, I want to real quickly run through what I call 10 things I'd like everybody to know about Conklin, because we as a company have been around for a long time. We have a very diverse product line. The AgroVantage products that we're going to be focused on today are really the bulk of our business, and it's mostly what I do. But the Conklin Company itself is based out of Shakopee, Minnesota, and we were actually started in business in 1954. Harry Conklin was a genius chemist. He graduated from Ames, Iowa, was a civil and chemical engineer back in 1918. Began developing lubricant products clear back in the 20s and 30s. He actually retired from a job he had in Minneapolis in 1954 after a heart attack, and he and his oldest son, Jack Conklin, incorporated the Conklin Company. But they worked out of a 1.5 stall garage in South Minneapolis. Harry literally mixing up the products, his lubricant products, in his basement in his garage, and Jack was his salesman. Today we've got over 200 different products in 6 major product divisions. Our Conklin High Performance Ag and Industrial Lubricants, our oldest line of products. We have a line of industrial clean maintenance products designed for hotels, motels, hospitals, nursing homes, schools, restaurants, places like that. And then our agriculture product line is our largest, about 53% of our business last year, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Our Conklin building products are about 30% of our business. It's the second largest of our divisions, and Fast Track or Animal Products is our third, and then we have a small line of Conklin Family Care products that are really out of some of the research we found with the Fast Track product. We've developed some products there. Fact number 3 is that we've been marketing direct since 1969. Our method of marketing is very simple. Conklin Company does the research, development, and manufacturing. They prep the products for the marketplace, but they basically sell direct to ag retailers and wholesalers and individuals that buy in large quantities, and our field managers, our independent field managers, do all the sales and promotion activities. So Conklin basically does the research, development, and manufacturing. Our independent field managers do all the sales and marketing. Fact number 4, we're based out of Shakopee, Minnesota, which is the southwestern suburb of Minneapolis. When we get fertilizer in here to this area, that's probably most likely where it's going to come from. We do have a manufacturing site in southern Illinois, but I think you're about equal distance. Is that right, Pete? We manufacture 80% of our own products in-house. We have some products that we manufacture outside the house because we don't have the right equipment to be able to put it together. But some of our regional manufacturing of our fertilizers mainly for the cost of transportation. And then those products are shipped direct to our customers in most cases. The current owners of the Conklin Company are Charles and Judy Herbster. Charles was a field manager with us. He was actually at the University of Nebraska about the same time I was, and he and I got to know each other there. He got started with us on a part-time basis while he was finishing up college, and he actually grew up on a farm in extreme southeast Nebraska. Falls City, Nebraska is his hometown. He was the only child. His grandma, Carrico, was kind of the matriarch of the family. She did 2 things her whole life. She milked cows and bought farmland. And she said when farmland got over $500 an acre, it wasn't worth that any more than that, so she wouldn't pay any more than that. So they quit buying farmland in Richland County, started buying in Kansas and Colorado. And so Charles, that was kind of the background he came from. He's a hard worker. His love, probably his passion besides farming is he's got a bunch of Richard Angus cows, and he's got a passion for growing high quality alfalfa. If you ever want to talk about growing alfalfa, he'd be glad to get on the phone with you and talk about growing high quality alfalfa. The world-class lubricant products is probably fact number 6. And what we like to say is that in any area that you can quantify results, we've got world record products. And this is Buddy Myers over in Zanesville, Ohio. He's got a 4020 there that's got today over 30,000 original hours on it without an overhaul. He's been using our lubricant since not very long after it was new. And so what we find is the vehicles have a much longer life and much higher efficiency when you're using the kind of lubricant additives that we use and the basic parasynthetic lubricants. Fact number 7 is we've got world-class livestock products. This is actually Lucinda. She's one of 7 of the last 8 world record cows that have been on fast track in their production. This was actually, she's from Twin Bee Dairy up at Marathon, Wisconsin, Floyd and Lloyd Baumann. But this product here is one that I really enjoy working with, number 1, because I've never seen a product fail to produce $5 per dollar spent or more in return. This product was actually developed by one of my professors at the University of Nebraska, Dr. Terry Kloffenstein, and a fellow by the name of Dr. Kim Shahani, and a fellow by the name of Dr. Eugene Sturridge on Conklin staff. And so we actually have 19 different products used for all types of different production livestock, as well as horses, dogs, and cats. Fact number 8, we've got world-class building products. Again, this is our 2nd largest division. Metal roofs are one of our specialties. If you've got a weathered, aged, leaking metal roof, we have a rusted hanging metal primer that we put on them, and then a finish coat that basically will seal up that roof. We have a 10-year warranty, a 25-year life for a fraction of the cost of metal replacement. And so a lot of our contractors do that. Another system that we do a lot of is the sprayed-in-place urethane foam insulation and coatings. The coatings is what protects the foam from the ultraviolet sunlight and allow you to be able to have the insulation value as well as the higher reflectivity. On ag production, we do the same thing around the basic grain bins. We seal them against moisture infiltration, but also against heat being dissipated, and the net result is we can reduce drying costs 25 to 30%. We use a lot of this urethane sprayed-in-place insulation in farm buildings, interior as well. Fact number 9, what we're going to talk about today is our AgroVantage products. Again, our biggest line of products. Francis Childs still holds the world record for corn production of 442.14, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we got to know Francis about 2000. He came over and did a presentation for some of our top distributors and managers to explain to them what he'd been doing at that time to raise 379 bushel world record. And he learned about some of our products, started using some things. The very next year he went to 408.22, the first verified yield over 400 bushel that had been produced. The very next year, after coming through some of our training programs, making some additional changes, he went to 442.14. He actually passed away in January of 2008, and we've got some guys that are coming close. Dave Hula last year had a 429 yield. We've got some guys that are breaking the 400 bushel mark, and so we expect this record to fall too one of these days. But the Conklin AgroVantage System, I want to give you kind of a bird's eye view, is this brand really is represented today by 3 different subgroupings of products, I would call them. Our original product, Wex, was a wetting agent, compatibility agent, anti-foam agent that was used in ag chemical spraying. And that was our initial ag product. We now have a full line of wetting agents, compatibility agents, pH control agents, drift retardants, everything that you really need to use to make your spraying of herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides more efficient. One of our big products, and I don't talk a lot about in this presentation, but I'll mention it here, is Complete, is a liquid AMS. And as a liquid AMS, basically you can reduce your costs, and it's much easier to work with than your powdered AMS products with your glyphosate spraying. In addition, we have a line of biologicals. Our seed treatments, Amplified DNL, I'll talk about, are really approved for every crop with the exception of soybeans. We just don't get as consistent results on soybeans, and so we have other products for that. Magnify LST is our biological treatment for soybeans, and so that's the one there. We also have a new product called Magnify LAI for corn and wheat. And then we have our Excito products, our plant growth regulators for soil as well as foliar application. They speed cell division in the plant surface and the leaf surface and in large cell size. Net result is you get a larger leaf surface on this very same genetics, and they allow that plant to absorb more sunlight, photosynthesize more energy, create more sugars, and that's where we get our increasing yields with that product. Another product, a couple other products we have in that biological line is we have forage treatments for silage and hay. And then in our fertilizer area, we've got, I'm quick to tell people we don't deal in commodities, we don't deal in liquid nitrogen, anhydrous, or dry broadcast products. What we have is a line of fertilizer materials known as Feast. Feast is our brand name, and it represents a product that is designed for row placement with the seed at planting time and foliar applications. That's really the niche that we fill with those products. We have a full line of micronutrients, and then we have a product called Guardian. And Guardian is a nitrogen stabilizing product that's used with liquid nitrogen or liquid manure. Our two goals with AgroVantage is to reduce input costs and at the very same time increase yields. That's the bottom line. And we really, about 90% of our business is with corn, soybean, wheat, and alfalfa. We have other crops that we work with, but that's probably 90% of our business. What's happened, what Jerry will allude to as he goes through his presentation, is that I'm quick to tell people that if you're satisfied with where your yields are and you love your program you're currently with, we're probably not a good fit for your operation. I think the NCGA guys that are always looking for a way to get an extra bushel, 5 bushels, 10 bushels, have been really attracted to what we do because they're looking for that in the competition. And as a result of that, for the last 10 years, about half of all the NCGA national yield winners and several hundred every year of the state winners have been customers of ours. And it's not because we give away products or we advertise. We don't advertise hardly at all. And so that's basically what's happened. Is this happens to be 2007. We had 13 of the national and 75 of the state winners using some of our products. What we're focused on is sound agronomy, plant and soil science. We're not out here on the fringe. We really, most all of our products come from either university developed research, and you'll see a lot of that if you come to some of our training programs like our Pro Ag 1. Number 2, we're looking for cost-effective, proven yield technologies. I'm quick to tell people we test a lot of products that people bring to us that will never see the light of day, we'll never put a brand name on them, we'll never market them, because unless you can show significant yield response for a reasonable cost and something that can integrate into your existing operation, it's not worth it to you as producers, it's not worth it to the retailers, it's not worth it to us to be able to market that. We're also looking for the highest payback applications first. We're trying to help farmers to see where they can spend a few dollars and get something very significant. And some of our, especially yield data from this year, will demonstrate we saw some tremendous response to some of our inputs this year. Number 4, we're looking for practical ways to integrate that into your operation. A friend of mine puts it this way. He says there's only one person that really likes change, and that's a wet baby. You know, everybody else is kind of change is a challenge at different levels. So what we're looking for is once we've found those technologies, once we've looked at where the biggest payback is, we're looking now for ways to find practical ways to integrate that in your operation without significant change in the way you do what you do. And then we do a lot of educational programs to show people how to move up the yield ladder incrementally to increase their profits. As I mentioned, Francis Childers met in 2000. His yield record at that time was 397.74, and for over the next 2 years he moved with a new world record of 442. The main things that he did was, well, he did deep tillage. We introduced him to Ray Rawson, and Ray up in Michigan really developed the whole concept of zone tillage. He went to 20-inch rows, but he added these specific things. He went to a soil analysis program that we use, and I'll talk a little bit about that. He went for the very first time to an in-furrow pop-up, or what we would call cold soil starter, 3 gallons per acre. That gave him, in fact, in his research, over a 12 bushel yield boost. The Sidekick is a significant product. It's a 002517 that is seed safe in the furrow up to a gallon. And that product at a quart per acre gave him a nice yield boost. MicroMaster Zinc in furrow again at a half a pint. All 3 of these were put in furrow. Now the MicroMaster Boron, and boron is one, as Jerry will talk about, is shown up with a lot of needs in a lot of cornfields, and that's one that you cannot put in furrow. So we don't put that one in furrow. We'll put it on 2x2. We'll broadcast it. We'll foliar it, but boron cannot be put in furrow. Guardian DL at 1 quart per acre. That's the product that basically slow releases your nitrogen over the growing season, and Wex at 1 quart per acre. When Francis and I used to do a few meetings together, and he said one of the things he'd always end his presentation with is you got to be willing to change. You got to be willing to try some new things. And one of the things that I find with all the NCGA guys is they're all trying one or two new things every year. Again, Francis passed away in 2008, but this was that world record corn. They did a root pit at a field day we had at his farm, and you can see just the rainforest of roots that he had underneath that plant. One of the things that Francis always said is when a corn plant's a foot tall, I want to have 18 inches of roots underneath it. And that was his goal, to get that crop off to a good start. We start with a soil analysis because that's obviously gives us our roadmap. What we do is I always tell people there's really three parts to a good soil sample. One is that a producer or as an agronomist needs to be out there taking a good representative core samples, getting it into a bucket in the bag, and getting it off to the lab with the right information without contamination. That's the number one project. Number two is that the lab then does the analyticals to show you the 17 known nutrients that we need to produce a corn crop to reach your yield goal. We're going to need to know what's there. And so they do the analytical, then they feed that to the Conklin Company, and we have a computer program that basically will say, okay, if you want to use the AgroVantage system, here's where we would spend dollar number 1, 2, and 3, and so forth. And again, we show you where our products fit in that mix, in that recipe, and then what we do is we say, okay, then you're going to need this much additional nitrogen, based on your sources, this much additional P and K, whatever else you might need. The key things I'm going to talk about are the amplified seed treatment, the feast fertilizers, the wetting agent, which also enhances root development, and the guardian nitrogen fertilizer additive. And then the micronutrients, but especially manganese. Manganese is showing up at high demand any place where we've had long-term use of glyphosate and ready genetics. And so the manganese is a great payback. Amplified D and L, the difference is the D is the dry product. It's a blue color. It has a talc carrier. That 1 2.5 pound container will be able to treat about 25 bags of seed if you're using bags. The Amplify L is also powder. It's kind of a white with maybe a little bit of a green tinge, and you dump it into a gallon to a gallon and a half of water, put it through a liquid seed treater, and that 1 pound would treat 1,500 pounds of seed, so about 30 bushels. So the difference here is just method of application. Whatever is easiest for a producer or for the individual that's using the product. If I had my choice, everybody would use the Amplify L. Number one, because you can put it on a seed 2, 3, 4 months if you want to in advance, if you have the time. Number two, you get more uniform coverage of the seed. Number three, we get just a little bit higher yield. And the last thing is you really don't need another thing to do right as you're filling up the planter every time. So if I had my choice, I'd have everybody using this, but it just doesn't work for everybody. And so the Amplify D is the option for the individual who wants to just try some, or the guy that's mixing it up right there at his planter. The Amplify L, I'll show you later a video of a very short video of one of our guys has put together a liquid seed treater for on-farm treatment that really is a big plus. If you can do that right on farm, it's even better. Amplify D and L, basically their mode of action is identical. What we're doing is we're trying to coat the outside of that seed with an additional source of adenosine monophosphate. That's the active ingredient. It was actually, this product was developed at the University of Arizona, and originally they developed it for use in cottonseed. Cotton has a lot of problems with cold, wet, stress, germination problems, low germ seed, and so forth. And basically what happens when the germination process takes place is adenosine monophosphate changes to diphosphate, changes to triphosphate, and what's known as the Krebs cycle. That's what fuels the fire of germination. Well, what happens is every seed has within it a certain amount of that adenosine monophosphate energy source. By coating the outside of this seed with adenosine monophosphate in the form of Amplified D or L, what we've done is we've given an additional source of that energy, and as that seed swells and begins to draw in moisture, it draws in this additional source of AMP. It's just an energy source. I think of it as a seed-applied fertilizer, because what you're doing is that seed doesn't have any roots, it doesn't have the ability to draw the nutrient from the soil, it's drawing it from the seed itself, and in this case from our Amplify. So it's compatible with other seed treatments that you might be using. It is not a live bacterial, so again, you can put it on a long time in advance if you want to. We don't recommend that with a dry product, but with a liquid product, that's not a problem at all. Growing up on a farm, raising livestock my whole life, I always say phosphorus is to a plant what colostrum is to a baby pig or baby calf. It needs it right away, it doesn't need it 2 weeks later. Phosphorus is needed early in the plant's life to get off to a healthy start. Initial root growth is dependent upon sufficient phosphorus at germination. If it gets phosphorus later on, it does a little good, and it's quantity and quality of phosphorus that determines the maximum potential yield early in the life of the crop. So why do we need to amplify? Well, because we don't deal with perfect growing conditions, not greenhouse conditions. We got cold, wet soils, hot, dry soils, little seed lot vigor, herbicide carryover, insect pressure, compaction, seedling blight, all those kind of things that are going to create problems. The last thing we want is a plant that looks like this. It's just nothing but a weed. It's going to draw nutrients and moisture from the healthy corn plant sitting next to it, and it's going to be able to do nothing but reduce potential yield instead of enhance it. So we're looking for uniform emergence and quick standard emergence is what we're looking for. The product cost is very nominal, $3 to $6 an acre. And again, the Amplify L with 1,500 pounds of seed, a single container here treats about 25 bags of seed. And so our payback is phenomenal. This is Jim Jars, one of our certified crop advisors from Northeast Nebraska. And Jim's got here a plexiglass planter that he put together prior to one of our farm shows there in Nebraska. And I will tell you this, with the Amplify D treated versus the non-treated, you won't see those kind of differences unless you do what he did, and that is he cold stressed it. He put it in the refrigerator overnight, pulled it out, put it back in. When you see the stress expressed, this is what it's going to look like. After the show, he tore it apart, and you can see the difference in root mass. This is the reason why most of the data I'm going to show you from 2012 is at least twice what we normally expect as far as payback on Amplify. When you get a root system under a plant early on that looks like that, and you get the kind of drought we had in Nebraska and other states around the country, that's why we're showing up so well this year, is because the greater the stress, the greater the response that this product is going to show up as. I just met John Southwick yesterday morning for the first time, but he is a producer's hybrid dealer who last year ran some plots with Amplify L, and it's on a producer's hybrid 7394, and on the one plot it showed a 13.48 bushel yield improvement, and on the other one 14.08. We would normally expect something maybe more like half that as kind of an average, and I tell guys, to be pessimistic, 2 to 3 bushels is kind of the low end of what you would normally see with the product. And at a $3 to $6 cost, that's pretty reasonable. This is down in Indiana. Specialty Hybrids is a seed corn company down there that said basically last year in 2011, they said, we hear people talking about seed treatments and the kind of yield response they're getting from, we ought to run some plots. So they did using a product called Bioforage, which I personally am not real familiar with. I know it's a biological. In their 3 locations, they showed a 0 average yield response. Where they used Amplify in 3 locations, they showed an average of a 17, which is, again, way above what I would normally expect for the product. That was their numbers. This is a picture of the seed treater, the liquid seed treater. I'm going to show you a little video of later. But Amplify L is what they used in their tests. And supposedly they're going to be doing a 3-year series of these tests, and I haven't seen their 2012 numbers yet. I throw this slide in here just to show you that this happens to be from over in Arthur, Illinois, but we do a series of field days across the country, and we have a lot of test plots going. And there are a lot of field days and such out there, but most of them are focused on genetics and not on fertility. And so I think there are a lot bigger fertilizer companies than the Conklin Company because of the niches that we fill and the kind of products that we have. There are much larger companies, but I don't think there's anybody that does more field days and more test plots across the country. Pete's had one up here at Cuba City for the last 4 years, and we compare different fertility materials. This happens to be one of the testimonials from our guys this year in 2012 over in Pennsylvania. It says the use of Amplify L resulted in 4,000 higher plant stand per acre and a yield advantage of 12 bushels per acre. This is really a bizarre picture, and I'm almost tempted to pull it out of my presentation because it is so bizarre. This Mark Hansen from Fairbury, Nebraska, was actually at our meeting night before last, and these, in fact, when I first saw this picture, I didn't even notice these, but this is an enlargement of these are turnips that were planted as a cover crop. These were planted, and then 2 weeks later, these were planted. The only difference was these got Amplify D. The smaller a seed is, in general, the more potential improvement you're going to get from adding this additional energy source. So we grow a lot of milo in southeast Nebraska, not near as much as we used to, but milo, grain sorghum, alfalfa. If you ever seed alfalfa and you put a strip into your field with Amplify and without Amplify, you'll see some dramatic difference. Because again, the smaller the seed, the more dramatic the response is going to be. But this is 2 weeks older than these, and Amplify D did it. The characteristics of nutrients, and you know, when I was in agronomy classes, they talked about the macronutrients being NPK. We almost always have to include sulfur now, because sulfur is, we're so starved for it, because number one, the impurities that used to show up as sulfur in a lot of our fertilizer materials are not there. We don't get the acid rain and the free sulfur, atmospheric sulfur we used to get. And on top of that, we're drawing more nutrients out of the soil all the time. And so we're finding lots of sulfur needs. And sulfur and nitrogen both kind of mass flow. They're available at colder temperatures. But P and K, I'm convinced you've got to learn how to manage those to really move up the yield ladder. And because they don't move in the soil, they're only available at higher temperatures typically. And so it's really key that we get those products where they need to be on time for the plant. Dr. Wilcox at Purdue University many years ago put together some research, and he showed that if you put 5 pounds of phosphorus with the seed at the time of planting, that was equivalent to 20 pounds 2 by 2, and that would be equivalent to 200 pounds on a broadcast plowdown basis, because the phosphorus has to be in close proximity to the plant. And so when I first saw this research years ago, I said, well, if that's true, why doesn't everybody replace their phosphorus? Well, I think, number one, certainly not everybody has the equipment and they're not set up to do that. But I think the main reasons, and when I talk about fertilizer materials, is all fertilizer materials are not created equal in terms of their ability to work in that way. Most of our fertilizer materials are polyphosphates and superpolyphosphates, 5 and 7 chain linked molecules that have to hydrolyze and break down in the soil. And most of them in their pure forms are very, very acid, pH 1 or 2. When you get them into their blended forms, 4.5 to 5.5 is common, but they're still acid enough that to put those in direct contact with the seed has some risk. Spent acids are also find their way into production, agriculture, through our fertilizer materials. Spent acids are byproducts of automotive and other manufacturing processes that leave a residue, basically. They leave a fluid that has some phosphorus in it, but unfortunately it also has some heavy metals, things like zinc as an impurity. It'll have things like cadmium, and also things like mercury and lead. Things that if you put those in direct contact with the seed in the furrow, you're probably going to have some toxicity issues. So spent acids are a concern, but salt index, purity, and pH all affect the ability of a fertilizer material to feed the crop without inducing stress. And so our whole concept here is that we want a fertilizer material that will reduce stress, not induce stress. Here's a chart that comes from Tennessee Valley Authority. Tennessee Valley Authority developed the polyphosphates. They helped put together the first 1034Os. What they're showing here is that putting these materials in close proximity to the seed has some risk. Zero applied fertilizer showed 100% emergence, whatever that was, in days 4 through 14. At 4.5 gallons per acre of a 1034O, which amounts to 50 pounds of P, 1034O O by O, right on top of the seed, showed a reduction in plant stand of 17% out here at day 14. When we doubled that to 9 gallons, we reduced it further to 42% emergence, and at 18 gallons, we successfully killed it, 92% of the corn. So their objective is not to show you how, not in any way to show any disrespect for 1034. It's a good product. Jerry will talk about, hey, he uses a lot of it. But the bottom line is it wasn't not a product that was developed specifically for row placement. It was a way, I grew up on a hog farm, and I learned really young that it's always easier to pump fertilizer than it is to shovel it. And that goes for all kinds of fertilizer. And that was one of the main reasons for going to a 1034 was we wanted a liquid solution that we could deal with instead of dry broadcast. And so the material is not a bad material. It just was never designed for row placement with the seed at the time of planting. On the other hand, our product was never designed for broadcast or pumping it through a pivot or anything else. The 1034O is typically going to be something in the neighborhood of a 70% poly, which is the usable fraction of phosphorus. It breaks down in the soil as it hydrolyzes, and it becomes 15 to 20% recoverable first year. Your 30% is pretty much tied up with other things already, but our product is specifically designed strictly for in-row with the seed at planting or foliar application. So it's 100% ortho, available at 50 degrees soil temperatures. It's a neutral pH, low salt index. It's to be designed to be able to be placed in the row without seedling damage. and to reduce your cost in your gallons per acre. Typically, to get the same amount of recoverable phosphate first year, you're going to need about 13 gallons of a 1034 versus a 5-gallon application of a feast product in furrow. And the bottom line is, over years and years of research, we found that if we were spending the same number of dollars per acre on a 1034 versus a product from in the feast line, we're looking at a 7 to 8 bushel yield advantage, spending the same number of dollars per acre. A lot of differences in fertilizer materials that are available out here today. This is just a lineup of products that we were using in some of our field plots where we're comparing fertilizer materials up in North Dakota. But you really can't tell a lot by just looking at a product. So we did analysis of these. The things that really concern me primarily are, things like cadmium. Cadmium in furrow is not a good thing. In fact, there's a lot of research been done out of Kentucky on the problems with cadmium showing up in our food chain, which is creating problems in some of our livestock. And so these are the things that the average farmer is not going to be able to take the time and spend the money to do. But there are a lot of differences in the fertilizer materials. One of those materials that I showed on the front page was Nutriflow's got a 31818. It's a clean-looking product, but when we compare it to our Feast 31818 using the same identical micronutrients, that product was 65 cents a gallon cheaper, but it produced 31.82 in a replicated plot, less bushels per acre. Amplifying this plot showed it 14.6. But anyway, there are the differences in how the plants respond to the different materials. Here's a goof plot from in Indiana where the guy didn't have his planter pump turned on. And so without the pop-up, you can see the difference in the plant stand and the difference in the size of the plants early on. Here's an example over in Virginia from one of our plots. This was a year ago, 134.4 versus 150 bushel. They actually put on a little more nitrogen on their plot, but ours included Amplify D and 1 quart of manganese. But you can see the fertilizer cost per acre was over $40 less with our program. Now, I tell people we're very competitive. A lot of times it'll be less, but it's not going to necessarily be $40 an acre less. But to get an extra 15.6 bushels or an extra $149 an acre net profit is what we're trying to help people to reach. Okay, here's our basic products that we sell as far as our fertilizer materials. We have standard formulations of a 918.9, a 318.18, and 824.0. I personally, my favorite is for us in Nebraska, 918.9 is probably our best combination. Jerry uses a lot of 318.18. 824.0 is a product that is not as winter stable. I don't like it because I think if you don't have some potash, you're really robbing yourself. But I'll sell it to guys that want to blend it with our sidekick because it will blend with the sidekick. 816.11.2 is probably the most popular blend that I sell. It's 4 gallons of 918.9 with a half a gallon of sidekick already pre-blended into it. 4 gallons of 318.18 with a half a gallon of sidekick comes out to a 215.19.3. So these are our primary formulations that we market. But we can basically custom blend just about anything that a person would want. We've got a 2600.5 boron, which is our Feast XL, which is used for foliar applications, a non-burning form of nitrogen. We use this mostly late season, 2 to 3 gallons per acre with, say, a fungicide in an aerial application. So that's our basic line. We ship the products direct in 4,000 to 4,350 gallon tanker loads. Pete has a large facility up here at in Cuba City, Platteville area, where he stores as much as 40,000 gallons on site. But our regional manufacturing will ship direct to our farmers in 1, 2, or 3 compartment truckloads. Here's basically, just real briefly, kind of a summary of our corn program. We start off with Amplified D or L on the seed. We go with our in-furrow placement of our pop-up starter with this maximum of a gallon per acre of the sidekick. And then we come in with our micronutrients based on the fertility recommendations with the exception of boron. We don't include boron. I haven't talked, well, let me cover this. I've got another slide on this, on the Magnify and the soybeans. But here's an example of what we're really looking to do. This was in extremely dry soil conditions, southeast Nebraska. And what you see is that day 18, we had virtually no emergence on the control. And by the time we got out here to day 22, we had about 30-some%. By the time, with the Feast, you popped it up to more like 60% emergence. But you can see where they amplified. Even at day 20, in those dry conditions, we had a 20% emergence by that time. And this is the line that indicates we're getting that more uniform plant stand. and that's where we're up here more closer to the 80% emergence. When we use those two products together, they really complement each other. In our soybean program, it's not a lot different, except that on the seed, we're going to use a high potency inoculant called Magnify. We're talking a cost of a couple, $3 an acre, but we've seen, I had a plot last year that went 9.3 bushel, and that's probably higher than I would normally expect, but we get really good response out of the Magnify product. It's a liquid inoculant, it's a bacterial, it's live, so we want to have that seed in the ground within 4 days of the time we treat it. Which again makes for a good argument for an on-farm seed treater. 918, 93, 1818, or 824 in furrow. Now, maximum, we would always recommend a splitter, a why-not splitter, because the sensitivity of a soybean is much greater to anything coming in contact with it. And I would normally just go with a couple gallons at the most, and then I would probably do at least a couple of gallons of foliar application later on with my herbicide. And then again, micronutrients in furrow, but not boron. Here's some 20-year summaries. What we've done is we've pulled our research from the last 20 years. Fee starters compared to 1030, where we typically see an average over the last 20 years of 7.3 bushel advantage. 318-18s versus competitive 318-18 is 12.6. 918-9s versus competitive 918-9 is 8.6. Amplified DNL average over the last 20 years, 8.9 bushel. Wex is a product that when we first introduced it, it was a wetting agent, but people started telling us, you know, where we used it at higher rates, we're getting better root mass and we're getting higher yields. We said basically there's no way that can happen. It's not an NPK, it's not a plant food. And the reports persisted. We finally did over 2,000 test plots, and what we found was our average root mass was a 16% improvement over the control and an average of 8.3 bushel yield increase. And here's what happens. This is Doug Porter from out of California, Missouri, showing his check where he used Wex only, where he used Amplify only, where he used Feast only. You can see the increase in root mass, but where you use those three ingredients in your production program together, the dramatic increase in root mass explains why your plants are bigger and you get better yields. But here's the other part of that, and the guys that have been using Wex on every acre every year for a long time, you can see where they have 25 to 34,000 plants per acre. If you got an extra 4 ounces of root mass out there during the growing season, that's like adding an extra 2 to 3 ton per acre of added organic matter that breaks down very quickly in the soil. And for $5 an acre, it's probably worth it just for that over time. But the big thing is if you get the added yield boost as well, you're talking about something that way more than pays for itself every year. So our application for that would be 1 quart on a broadcast basis with your pre-plant pre-emerge herbicide. Never put Wex in furrow. It's not designed for that. It can be used as a wetting agent. As a wetting agent, it's just a pint per 100-gallon spray solution. But for that application, to get the kind of root mass improvement that we want, that's the way we do it. Guardian, I'm going to summarize a whole lot of research into 2 slides here. Guardian is a product its active ingredient is DCD, dicyandiamide. It is a product that when it is it's labeled as a slow-releasing nitrogen. But what it is it's really a nitrogen stabilizer, nitrogen inhibitor. We don't label it as such because it's one of those things where most all of our nitrogen inhibitors like Inserv, that have been around for a long time, they are pesticides and they're labeled as pesticides. And so this is labeled as a fertilizer, but it does, it slow releases your nitrogen. It's designed only for these applications, liquid nitrogen, liquid manure, and then you can impregnate it on dry urea as well. It comes in dry powdered form or dispersible liquid that is very heavy and thick, and it can be used for reducing leaching and denitrification and lower nitrogen rates and increases your yields. This is, we had at least 4 years of studies at 12 different land-grant colleges, as well as Tennessee Valley Authority. And this is one summary slide I'm going to do for all of that research. This is University of Minnesota. What they showed is at the 125-pound rate of nitrogen, we saw an average of a 13 bushel per acre yield increase. On the 150-pound rate, we saw an average of a 17 bushel yield increase over 4 years. Now, here's what I want you to do is forget this one and forget this one and just look at these 2. What you got here is if for 25 pounds less nitrogen, if, let's just throw out a figure, you were spending 50 cents a pound on nitrogen, this would be $12.50 an acre less expensive. You're going to spend $8 for Guardian, and what you've got here is for $4.50 an acre less income, you've got or less expense, you've got an extra 4 bushel average yield response. So that's where we really encourage people to consider cutting back their nitrogen rate and adding Guardian for a more stable solution and really a better quality nitrogen source. Over the years, our Guardian DL and DAF has shown us an average of 13.4 when compared to competitive nitrogen inhibitors, 11.3. WEX, over the last 20 years, in their research, they've shown 9.2 bushel. Foliar Excido and Soil Excido, 8.2 and 10.1 yield boost. And this is probably the last thing I'd reach for. I want to make sure your fertility program's right before you start using a plant growth regulator. And then our full system shows an average of a 17.1 bushel yield improvement over the last 20 years when compared to conventional programs. The one precaution I tell people is that with the Guardian product, it is very heavy and thick. I have a good customer out in western Nebraska who I was with Tuesday, and I remember his call to me last spring was the first time he used Guardian, and he said, "Dennis," he says, "pumping this stuff's like trying to pump peanut butter," and it really is. It is thick, it's heavy, it's hard to use, and so it'll gravity feed fine, but if you try pumping it, it'll just burn up a pump. What this guy did here, this is Jay Myers up in Colfax, North Dakota. He has his liquid nitrogen tank. He's got it going over to his tank that he's going to spread with. And what he's got is he's got some micronutrients and he's got his Guardian teed into that. So what he does, he knows about how many gallons he needs. He turns on the valves, opens them up, and it'll siphon just fine. And then when he's got the right amount, he shuts off the valves, and then he relies on his pumps in the tank to circulate it. Once you get Guardian in suspension with liquid nitrogen, it stays in suspension just fine. But it is a challenge. Now we've got a new product, and I can't remember if it's going to be available in Wisconsin or not. You know,
I don't know.
We've got a new product that we're just introducing this year on a limited basis. It's only available on totes. It's basically half as concentrated as the other product, so it'll be easier to work with, easier to pump. It's a 1500 analysis versus a 3100. Its price is about half. So you'd have just freight costs basically, but we ship most of our products in here in freight-free loads anyway, so the freight shouldn't be an issue. But that's a product that we need to check into. I'm not sure it's only available in certain states this year, but, and I'm not sure about Illinois and Wisconsin, where we're at on that. Francis Child said, if you're currently using anhydrous ammonia, consider investing the same dollars in UAN solution and Guardian instead. He said, for me, this change yielded an 8 to 10 bushel per acre yield increase. Application and timing on your glyphosate. Some of you guys are familiar with this, some of you may not be, but Dr. Huber at Purdue University, who's now retired, he and Barney Gordon and K-State did a lot of research on yellow flash. And what they found was that yellow flash was an indication of a manganese deficiency. Whenever you hit glyphosate on a Roundup Ready plant, you're going to see some restriction of the ability of that plant to uptake manganese during a period of time. Well, what he found was the solution is if you could add manganese to your Roundup Ready tank mix. He says basically you can offset it, but he was very specific, and Monsanto is too. You need to make sure it's a fully chelated manganese that's chelated with EDTA, because you don't want to tie up using the wrong kind of micronutrients. You don't want to tie up your glyphosate and restrict your weed control. So this is one of the things that he's found. Well, what we've done is a bunch of testing with it, and it's really become kind of a standard application, standard procedure for our customers, is that you can see here in these trials, we saw an average of a 7.4 bushel difference in yield on soybeans, which is 1 pint of manganese, which is a cost of about $4 or less per acre. And so I tell people, again, I'm conservative. I'm saying, what if you got 2 or 3 bushel? 2 or 3 bushel at $10 a bushel is a huge payback on a $4 investment, and it does take another trip over the field. You just throw the product right in on top of your Roundup Ready tank mix. Here's an example of our Feast XL. It can really produce some dramatic results. This is double crop soybeans went in after wheat down in Missouri. And what you see is a 3-gallon application of the Feast XL 2600.5 boron, and it basically feeds that nitrogen to the plant without burning the leaf surface. And so that's and it can be easily piggybacked with herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, insecticides. Okay, I'm gonna jump to. I'm going to have Jerry come up and have him talk about his operation, his program, what he's seen with it, and Jerry's a 21-time NCG yield winner. He's from down in Missouri. He'll kind of tell you his story, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. So help me welcome Jerry Cox.
So I need to ask if there's any people in here that entered the National Corn Growers Yield Contest, because I might need to change my presentation here. Slipped up on me last night, and Gene was in there, and I didn't recognize him, so I don't want to give away any of my secrets, you know. No, just kidding. I don't have any secrets. I wish I did have. But no, we just kind of try to look for things that give us a little bit of a yield increase, and just try to compound those, you know, and keep adding up. So anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story with Conklin and how I got started using them, and some of the history I have with the NCGA, and really that's how come I started using Conklin products, is because of the National Corn Growers Yield Contest. Well, I've already messed it up. I told you it'd take a while before I learned how to use this thing.
Let's see here.
Oh, there it is. Oh, the right one.
The right one.
Okay, my other right. Like that sign you had? That's what messed me up, I know. Okay, there we go. Talk about this just a little bit, but this is just a list of NCGA national and state winners. And like Dennis said, normally about half of all the winners are using some of the Conklin products. So, and another thing is they're from all over the United States. We have people who use them all the way from California to New York. So that's all that is. Okay, here's where I actually I'm from. I live in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is right on the Mississippi River, right on the west side of the Mississippi River. Now our farm is down there where that star is, which is just about 15 miles southwest of Cape Girardeau. I know this has been a tough year, and everybody had some challenges, but I would assume this probably is not one of the challenges that people had this year. Not one that I had either. This was taken last April. So this, you know, I don't know. People said, well, would you rather have it too dry or too wet? For us irrigators, and I do irrigate most of my land, I'd rather have it a little bit too dry as too wet, because we can deal with the dry weather. But this is not flooding from any river or anything. It's just our land is so flat. If we get a heavy downpour, 4 or 5 inches overnight, this is what happens. That water will be gone within about 24 hours. And we've actually never lost any crop due to floods. Right where I'm at, I haven't. But things can be worse. This picture was taken, this happened last year over at Charleston, Missouri, right on the Mississippi. Missouri took one for Illinois last year. I don't know if you guys know it or not, but the reason this happened was it's right across the river from Cairo, Illinois, and the Corps of Engineers, they have a floodway over there which is protected by a levee. But if the river gets to a certain gauge on the Cairo, Illinois side, their level, I don't know what the gauge, 50 feet or something like that, the Corps of Engineers can blow that levee to protect the town of Cairo, Illinois. It flooded about 100,000 acres, and this was probably pretty close to the point where the levee was blown, and that's what it did. It flooded about 100,000 acres, but there weren't that many acres. I don't know, a couple hundred acres it actually did this too. And this was probably done in late April, but it did, the water did go off, and the majority of that 100,000 acres did get put in, and they had a pretty decent bean crop on that last year. Just another picture of some of the damage that did. That land will never be put back into production. Okay, a little bit about my farming operation. All of my land has been precision leveled. Like I said, we're really flat. And basically we level it just to get the water off. Very, very, very little tiling has ever been done in our area. So to get rid of the water, we just level the ground so it has a small slope. Normally it'll be 1/10 of 1%. That's the slope we put it. It's actually flatter than that, but we put that much slope in it through land leveling to get the water off the land. And once we've done that, then that does allow us to furrow irrigate. Actually, water will run down between the furrows with that much slope on it. Wide variety of soils from sands to heavy clay. Some CECs maybe as high as the 40s, but the majority is going to be in that 8 to 10 range, which is our silt loam soils. This is just a few pictures of some of our farmland. I like to tell everybody on the upper left picture there, that's looking north, and there's a highway up there, and then on the other side of the highway, that's where the hills, and we got rock bluffs there. So basically where we're at is where the Mississippi Delta land starts over there on the Missouri side. We're just a little bit north of where the Missouri Bushel starts there. But as you look south, it's completely flat. It's for miles and miles, probably all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, it's flat. Just another picture of some corn there looking south. Most of our land, I said we irrigate about 90% of all of our land. This is what we do. This is called poly pipe. That's just a big roll of pipe that's kind of like a garbage bag. That would probably be about 9 millimeters, 9 mil, what we call it. We just roll that out and then punch holes in it and let the water run down between the rows. So that's how it's irrigated. Okay, a little bit of other information. We're on 30-inch rows, and the main reason we stay on 30s is because we have to have a ridge there, so we have a furrow to run that water down between. I farm about 2,000 acres now. I've got 1,100 acres of corn and 900 acres of beans, but basically we're about even now because we rotate every year from corn to soybeans. We don't have any corn on corn. Now we're up to about 90% irrigated. Populations on our corn, we have increased them since I made this slide. We're up to around 40,000 on our contest fields and around 32,000 on our regular acres. But you got to remember now, as far south as we are, we plant different hybrids, longer maturities. The majority of our hybrids are going to be a flex ear type hybrid. The shorter season normally is a fixed ear, and those go in higher populations because I know Pete here had a plot this year. You planted much higher than that, didn't you? Much higher. But that's what I do. One of the things that we really strive to do is to get that picket fence type stand, and you know, I think that's key. I mean, you can increase your yields by just paying a little bit more attention to detail and using some of the newer technology, newer equipment now. And we also want to get that even planting depth too, so that we get those seeds all up at the same time. And when we do that, you know, then we get that good evenness up there where the ears are put on the plant. They'll all be up there, you know, right at the same height. So that's one way you can tell if you did a good job. When you start getting those ears that are a foot and a half apart on height, then you probably that's basically due to not a good planting depth. Very. Last year, well, this is one of the things that I've done, and I'm sure there's probably people in this room that use these E-sets for precision planting, but they have really helped get that picket fence type stand. And last year I did a meeting down in Tunica, Mississippi with Dr. Eric Larson. He was from Mississippi State University. It was a soybean, cotton, rice, and corn conference that they have every year. And we were together, and I didn't even know this. This was his slide. He had done some research, and he let me have this on planting speed and comparing the John Deere vacuum plates with the E-sets. And this was pretty dramatic, and he let me have this, so I like to show it. At 3 miles an hour, which is the blue graph there, they were both the same. But you can see what happened with the John Deere as you increased your speed up to 6 miles an hour, you lost 13 bushels per acre. This is replicated work that he did. Now with the E-sets, they actually even went up as he went a little bit faster, then leveled off. But just something everybody might want to consider, you know. This is just a picture of the 2020 seed sense monitor. I've had that for about 5 years. I'm so impressed with it. I just took a picture there of it. Anybody in here using these things now? You know, usually every meeting I go, at least a few people are using it. But boy, it's a great tool. You know, I can't point and show you different things, but if you look over there, it shows you the percentage of skips, the percentage of doubles you have, tells you your downforce here, how much pressure you got on the unit. Of course, you want this ground contact to be 100. If it's not 100%, that means it's not all the way at the ground, then you're getting an uneven planting depth because it's not all the way against the ground. And if you don't, it'll even tell you, if you're not doing a very good job of planting, it'll actually, that box will turn red and it'll show you somewhere you're losing. Depending on the price of corn, you can put that in there, but it'll tell you how many dollars you're losing per acre by not doing a good job. So I really like that. Okay, a little bit about the NCGA yield contest, because if you've never entered it and you hear these yields and you may not know what you have to do to enter the contest and how these yields are verified. So I just want to give you a little basic information here of how the contest is run. Because like I said, if it wasn't for that, I more than likely wouldn't be here today talking to you guys. But when you enter the contest, you have to have at least 10 acres of one hybrid. It can be more than that. It could be 150, 160, but in that field, you have to have at least 10 acres of one hybrid. And when you harvest it, you have to harvest at least 1 1/4 acres. And when you do harvest it, you have to have 1 or 2 independent supervisors there. And the supervisor's job are to do the measurement, make sure the measurement's right, check the truck, make sure they're empty, make sure the combine's run empty. And then when you go to weigh it, they supervise the weigh and the moisture testing. Okay, when you do harvest it, if it comes in between 250 and 299, if you have 2 supervisors there, then you're finished. That's all you have to do. But if you only have 1, then you have to recheck it and have 2 there at the same time. Now, when you are harvesting the plot, there's a certain pattern that you have to do it. You can start anywhere. Say you had a 100-acre field. You can start anywhere you want in that 100-acre field. You can pick out what you think is your best spot, and you can start. But you make a pass through the field, and then you have to skip 3 times the number of rows your corn header is. So if you've got an 8-row corn header, you make a pass, you skip 24 rows, you make another pass. If you still don't have your 1 1/4, you skip 24 more, and you would make another pass. Of course, if it was a 6-row header, you would skip 18. If it was a 36-row header, I mean a 36-row, well, that would be a wide header, wouldn't it? If it was a 12-row header, you would skip 36 rows. So you do that same pattern until you have at least 1 1/4. Now, you can go over that if you want, but then you get into the problem if your yield's pretty high, you know, depending on what kind of truck you got there, you get a lot of corn. So we usually try to stay as close to that 1 1/4 as we can, but it has to be at least. Okay, if you have 2 supervisors there and it's less than 300, then you're finished. But if you only have 1, you have to do it again. If the yield, the first check goes over 300 bushels, then you have to call the NCGA and they will assign 2 new supervisors to check that. So you have to recheck it regardless. And also the second check is always the official check. That's the number you got to take, whether it be higher or lower than the first. It doesn't matter what the first was, the second is the final. And if you place first, second, or third in the nation, then the following year, the NCGA, they send out a representative to be one of the supervisors when you do your plots. So that's just basically how the contest is run. This is the website for the NCGA yield contest. And they always publish the results, will be on the 15th or after of December. Actually, people that haven't, around here about all the corn's out, I think I saw maybe one field, but they have until the 1st of December to turn these entries in. And there may be some people out west in the higher elevations that may harvest a little later, may not be all be in now. But this year the crop went out, got in early, got out early, so most of them are probably in, but they do have to the 1st of December. Okay, here's when I got started, and I'm just going to go through and kind of show you some highlights where the yields were and what they've done over the years. I actually started entering the yield contest back in 1982. The very first year our yield, now I've entered every year, but I'm just showing you some of the highlights. Our very first yield was 201 bushel per acre. That would have been on some irrigated land. Not very high by today's standard, but I was pretty happy with that back in 1982. That was 30 years ago. In 1987 was the first time we won first in the state of Missouri with a yield of 217. 92 we won first in Missouri again. We had 249, and I was really excited because, boy, I just almost hit 250, which back at that time was a pretty big number. That was something I'd been dreaming about back at that time. Our first national win was actually in 1995 in non-irrigated. That would be a 2A non-irrigated. And I'll tell you what the 2A means. They just, on the non-irrigated divisions, now, they used to have 3 non-irrigated divisions, was rich till, no-till, and conventional. But a couple years ago, they eliminated the rich till because there just wasn't enough entries. A lot of people were rich tilling earlier, but they went to strip till, and they included strip till and no-till. So strip till and no-till are actually one class now. But the 2A, they divided those up into states. The 2A class comprised of the states of Minnesota, Ohio, Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. So that were your 2A states, and all the other states were one. So you only competed against the people in your states. So that's why we say 2A. Third place there was a 221, which at the time was really not a very high yield, but that year the yields were down all over this area. So actually first place that year was only 227 bushels. I wish it was that low, I could win maybe more, but boy, I'll tell you, they've really raised now to win now. Of course, this year I think it's not going to take near as much in the non-irrigated classes, but normally the last few years to even place, you had to be up in the 290s in the non-irrigated class. Didn't have any luck at all for 3 years after that. I kind of thought, well, boy, I've got it figured out, but I didn't have any luck at all. But in 1999, we did win another national award in the ridge till non-irrigated with 229. And then that was the first time I saw anything about Conklin. I went by their booth at the Commodity Classic Trade Show, and they had a demonstration there. It kind of caught my eye, just like Dennis showed Jim jars there that had the corn plants with amplified D on it and without, and it was really pretty dramatic when you actually see that and see the root system on the plants that's got the amplify on it. And I really intended to use some of that the very next year because, it's something, like he said, you really see the difference when you have stress. And we try to plant just as early as we can. And, anytime after about mid-March, we're going to plant if the ground's suitable to plant. So I thought, well, that's something I can really use. But when I got back home from the Commodity Classic, which is usually the 1st of March, the weather was pretty, and we got in the field, and I said, I don't have time to mess with it. So I did not use it in the year 2000. But the next year I went back, and I did order some product. I got some amplified D, some starter, and some micronutrients. And the guy that I talked to, he asked me if I'd do a test plot. I said, yeah, I'd love to do a test plot because I'd like to see what this stuff is going to do on my farm. So we did put in a test plot, and I'll have some results. I'll have the results of that here in a minute. So actually started using the Conklin products in 2001, and that year I did win another national award in the 2A ridge till non-irrigated. Our yields are starting to creep up a little bit. And here's some of the results we saw that very first year. Now these are my results, not somebody else's. These are actually mine. When we did the test plot, Pioneer brought out a weigh wagon, and I did the harvesting. There was actually no one there from Conklin that was even involved in it. But this is what we saw with the Amplified D. We got about a 3 bushel to the acre yield increase that first year. This is the wax product that Dennis had talked about. This is the very first product that Conklin ever had. They've had this, I don't know, when did they come out with this product, Dennis? Back in the early 70s?
Probably about 70.
About 70s, and it's still, it was, I mean, a lot of people made a living selling that one product. They really used to sell a lot of it, and why they don't sell more of it now, I don't know. But I got to tell you, the wax product in that test plot, because I really kept an eye on that test plot that first year because I was looking to see if I could see any difference. The wax product was the one that stood out more than any other product. I could visually, see that something was going on there. The plants were darker colored, taller, and when we harvested it, it gives us a 6 bushel to the acre yield increase. Now this was put on at 1 pint per acre, right behind the guy had a special planter designed to plant the plots because he had cone tanks on it so we could drain fertilizer out and put in something else. But at 1 pint to the acre, and I use a little bit higher rate than that. I normally now use 1.5 pints to a quart, depending on the soil type. The heavier the soil, you'd want to go up to a quart. If you had a lighter soil, even kind of sandy, 1 pint to the acre would be fine. But it's become one of my favorite products. This was our starter fertilizer. The one on the left would just be a control. The next one would be 9-18-9 at 5 gallon per acre. Picked up about 10 bushels. The next one is 5 gallon of 3-18-18. It showed a yield increase of over 9. And then the last one is 10-34-0, also at 5 gallon per acre. Now all these were put right on the seed in the furrow. It picked up over 6 bushels per acre. I had been using 10-34-0 at the time, so we included that in the test. This is our micronutrient. Now, before we did this, planted this plot, we did send in a couple weeks before, send in a soil test, and it come back. So everything we did exactly what the soil test called for. So if it called for 1.1 or 3 or whatever, we did exactly what it called for. So starting out over there on the left was just a control. It had no fertilizer, it had no micronutrients, had nothing. And then the next one was when we added the 3-18-18 only. Now in that case, it only picked up 4 bushels per acre. But the next one, we had the 3-18-18, and we put the 3 pints per acre of zinc in there with it. Well, on top of the 3-18-18, we made about another 4 bushels per acre with the zinc. So that's what the soil test called for. Then the next one, we took the zinc out. Remember I said they had cold tanks, so we could take all that out, put in fresh 3-18-18, and then we added 1.8 pints of manganese. And that picked up about 3 bushels per acre. Then the next one was copper, and that's not one we use very much of. The only reason I really like copper, it is the prettiest blue color you've ever seen in your life. It is really pretty. Actually, Dennis tells me a story about one guy that orders a little bit of copper every year just to put in his starter fertilizer tank so he can see what the level is. He knows when he's getting low. But it is pretty. But anyway, it didn't do much. It did give a little bit of a yield increase. I give it that, and I don't know that I use any copper at all. but he called for it, so we had it to test. Now the next one is boron, and Dennis mentioned before there's only one wrong way to use boron, and that's putting it in the seed trench with the seed. So this was actually, now we did use the 3-18-18 starter on the seed. Then we put the boron in with some nitrogen because his planter was set up to apply all of our nitrogen when he planted. So it was way off the row. I think it was 4 inches away from the row. He put the boron in with the nitrogen, and it picked up, it looks like a little over 7 bushels per acre with that boron. But that's what the rate we called for was 6.4 pints. Then the last one was we would have took everything out, took the boron out. Then we put that sidekick product in at 1 gallon per acre. That's the highest rate that they recommend you use in fertile. Put that in with the 3-18-18. And that picked up right at 7 bushels per acre. So, you know, that was what we saw, and I was really amazed because everything the soil test said we needed to do, we did show a yield response to that. Okay, we got a little more familiar, with the products and started using a little more of it and doing more soil testing. They had the online soil test. We send our soil test to Midwest Labs, and then that's how they come back from there, and then they inject the Conklin recommendations on there. Actually, what they did, they give you a recommendations if you were just using a dry, a normal, what we might say, fertilizer program, and then they'll all come back and have the Conklin recommendations, which also might include some dry fertilizer or whatever you want to use. They don't just say you need to use 5 gallons of this and that's it. Now, if your soil test would be really, really good, that might be all you need. But if the soil test is not up there real high, it might say you need to use 5 gallons of this starter fertilizer plus some additional P or K. So that's kind of how that works. And another good thing about those soil tests, you get them online, and they've got a deal on there where if you want to change your yield goals, say, well, maybe this is going to be a drought year. I wish we'd known that, but anyway, we didn't know at the time. You could lower what your yield goal was, and it would refigure your fertilizer recommendation. Or if you want to change crops, say, nah, I'm not going to plant corn there this year, I'm going to go to soybeans. You could actually plug soybeans in there, and it would figure what you needed to do for soybeans. So it's a real neat system. So when we started using more in 2002, and that year we did win 2 national awards. And this was the first year I finally broke 250 bushels. Remember in 1992, I had a 249. Well, it took me 10 years to go above that. But we did hit 260 that year. Wasn't a national winner, but it was first in the state of Missouri in the irrigated division. In 2003, we started doing more. We entered more, started entering the no-till and stuff. And one of the reasons was Augustus, they offered a $4,000 cash incentive for first place winner. You had to win first in the nation to get that. Another thing we did that year was the first year we did try foliar feeding, had done no foliar feeding up until that time. And one thing that really stood out that year, I remember we had a really cool month of August. Haven't seen it that cool in August since, but we really did have a nice year in 2003. That year we did win 2 first places. Seemed like our yields just went to a whole new level that year. Had the 284 in the non-irrigated division there, and then actually our non-irrigated were almost as high as our irrigated. Because you can see there in Ridgestill irrigated, we only had 283. I did a meeting out there in Nebraska earlier in the week. It was western Nebraska. And they said, well, why do you even irrigate if you get yields that good? And I said, well, it's because of a year like this. Our irrigated was making 150 to 170 bushel better than our non-irrigated this year. And our irrigation is really cheap because we don't have to go very deep for our wells. We have real good water. So it's really, and with the land already being leveled, it just doesn't cost as much to irrigate. It's really cheap for us. 2004, we won another. 2005, 2006, we won 3 national awards. 2007 was another high water mark. We finally went over the 300 bushel mark. We did have several entries there, and over 300. 321 has been our highest we've had. 2009 didn't win any first place, but we did have another 321. I got to tell you, 2010, 2011, we did not win any national awards. This year we've got some entry in over 300, but we won't know. I think 311 was our highest entry this year. So we won't know until December, but I doubt if that's high enough in the irrigated division. It'll probably, in the irrigated division, I would think you would probably have to be up to 325 to 30 bushel range to win a national award this year. But that's just a guess. I have no idea. Okay, now I've talked about, you know, the yield contest, but like I asked you, there's nobody here entering the contest. So what's it done on our whole farm average? Now this includes everything, dry land, which is not very much anymore. This year I actually only had 25 acres of dry land, corn. The rest of it was irrigated. But 10 years ago when I started using the products, we had an average of around 155 to 160 on all of our acres. The 3 years from 2008 to 2010, our average was 220, which was a gain of around 60 to 65 bushels. But I tell everybody, hey, look, if I hadn't done anything different due to the better genetics we have and all the traits we use now, I'd probably be doing 20 bushels per acre, 2 bushels per year. So we take that off, and I give credit to the AgroVantage system of around 40 to 45 bushels per acre. All right, now I'm going to take you through and kind of give you what my fertility program is, what I actually do. You know, when I'm planting my corn, it all starts with the Amplify because that's what we put on the seed. Dennis has talked a lot about it. First couple of years we used the Amplify D. Then I switched to the Amplify L, and I do like it a little better just because we put it on before we plant. We don't have to, you know, be out there stirring that powder in that box on a windy day with that blue dust flying all over you. It's not toxic or anything. It doesn't hurt you, but it will turn you blue on a windy day. Believe me. So we do use the Amplify L. That's what we use. Since I started using the Amplify L, here's what I found. I did a mycogen test plot in 2006, and the agronomist, he was also using some Conklin products, and he wanted us to test the Amplify L on 3 different hybrids. So we did. We put it on 3 different hybrids, with and then without. And we saw a 5, 6, and 7 bushel to the acre yield increase on those 3 hybrids. And we've had it in test plots, and I've done it in pioneer plots also where we would put it on a hybrid with and without. And the lowest yield increase we've ever seen has been 2 bushels per acre. That's been the very lowest. The highest I've ever seen has been 12. So that range up there, 5, 6, 7, that's pretty well what you can expect year in and year out. You know, I've mentioned it before, you know, I farm about 1,000 acres, and I said, look, just this one product, just take this one product. And I used to figure it cost about 1 bushel per acre to use the product, but with the higher prices we have today, it's probably more like a half a bushel. That's what it actually cost. But say it did cost 1 bushel, and say 6 bushel would be an average every year in and year out. So if you took 1 bushel off of that, you'd have 5 bushel free because you've already paid for it with that 1 bushel. So just on 1,000 acres like I farm, and I consider myself in our area, about an average size farmer. There's a lot bigger farmers and some smaller, but at 5 bushels on 1,000 acres, that's 5,000 bushels. Now, I don't know what you're getting for your corn. Now, we do have a pretty good market down there. We can still get well over $7, probably $7.50 right today. So at 5,000 times $7.50, that's pretty good. That's almost a new pickup every year, you know, if you want to figure it that way. Here's my row support. Now here's what we put in the furrow when I'm planting. I use a 3/18/18 starter. That's what the soil test says I need to use. Different areas, you know, if you've got high K levels, they may go to the 9/18/9. Like Dennis says out in Nebraska, they use mostly the 9/18/9. We use a 5 gallon per acre on our contest fields, 4 gallons per acre on our regular fields. We add a gallon of this sidekick product, that 002517S. That gives us some more potassium, plus we're getting that sulfur there. That's a friendly source of sulfur. At 1 gallon per acre, we put that on all of our acres with the 3/18/18. Depending on the soil test, this is the only micronutrient I normally will put in furrow will be zinc at 1 to 2 pints per acre. And we apply that with the rebounder and the why not splitter too. Here's just a picture that what happened was I filled up with fertilizer and I turned the pump off and I forgot to turn it on. And when I got up to the north there just a little bit, I did turn it back on. Didn't check the yield. It wasn't a very big spot. Just a picture to show you, you know, what it looks with and without. Here's a chart I like to show everybody, and the main reason I did it was it just really surprised me, and I did not realize this, how important potassium was earlier. Dennis has already talked about how important phosphorus is early to a corn plant. But if you look at this chart, this was put out by the Phosphate and Potash Institute, and it shows the percent of the total phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen it uses in the first 25 days and the second 25 days. So they circled the potash down there. It actually uses 9% of its total potash in the first 25 days, and really only uses 4% of the phosphorus. Over twice as much required. In the second 25 days, it's used 44% of the total potash and 27% of the phosphate. So that, I didn't realize, you know, before I saw this, how important potash was early, because it uses a high percentage of it early. And I had, now that I know kind of what to look for in a corn plant, I have seen potash deficiency early until I started using these Sidekick and these higher starter fertilizers with potash. Does anybody know what potash deficiency looks like on corn? It looks very similar to what a nitrogen deficiency. You know, you get those older leaves, you get that yellowing down there. It start yellow on nitrogen. It starts from the center of the leaf and goes out. But if you have a firing on the outside edges, that is a potash deficiency. So that's how you tell the difference. Here was one year of our test results was by adding 1 gallon of that Sidekick, we got a 17 bushel to the acre yield increase, which is not typical. Normally it's about half that. Okay, here's just a picture of the rebounder and the splitter that I use. That's just what I've got on my planter. Other people, you know, a lot of people use Keaton. That's fine. You can use those too. One of the reasons I like to show this, we were in western Nebraska, and that's where these are made, out in Enola, Nebraska. That's way out west. And we did those meetings there Tuesday, and we were coming back by there, and we stopped by the plant there, and Paul Shafford, he's the owner of that company, he happened to be there, and so we got to talk to him. And, he showed us a few things that they're coming out with in another year or so, so I thought that I'd better just put in a good word for him. I've met him a few times, a real nice fellow. Okay, now while I'm putting that into furrow, I'm also putting some other nutrients on with the planter. I have my planter set up to put on a 2x2 with a fertilizer disc. So we'll run another 8 to 10 gallon of 1034O because Remember I said the soil test will say, it might say to put 5 gallon of 3-18-18 and this and that, but it'll also say in addition you need some more phosphorus. So this is where I put it. I used the 1034-0 and put it 2 by 2. We'll add a little nitrogen with that. We'll also run 8 to 10 gallons. It's a 28004S, which is made up by, we're far enough south, now up here most people might use 28, but we all use 32 down there. Was at a Pro Ag 1 meeting one time, and Dennis David, talk a little bit about him later, but he was doing the meeting and he asked this Rod Livesay what the difference between 28 and 24 was, and Rod says 4. Yeah, it is. But really the only difference is that the 28% has got some water added to it to make it more stable for colder weather. And do you use 28 up here, Pete? Yeah. But down there we're a warm enough climate that we use 32%. So that's how we get the 28 there, is we add ammonia thiosulfate and get some sulfur with that. We'll run another 1 to 2 pints of zinc in there. And then here's where we put our boron on. Have not taken a soil test. I've been sending them in for years and years. Ever since I got on this program since 2001, have not sent in a soil test yet that did not call for boron. Every one of them. So we put boron in there with the nitrogen to keep it out of the furrow, put it over in that 2 by 2. In addition to all this, all of our acres gets a quart of wax with our pre-emerge herbicide. Now we put on that rate to increase your yields. It gives us a bigger root mass, that wax, for some reason. Now you can use wax and go over the top, but you can't go to these heavy rates post-emerge. Actually, if you're using it as a wetting agent and you're going over the top of a crop, 1 pint per 100 gallon of solution is all you can use. So we use the heavy rate, use it up front, pre-emerge. Now our nitrogen management, we'll come back early, post-emerge, as early as we can get in there, and we'll run around 55 gallons of a 30-002S plus a quart of the Guardian DL, and we side dress it when it's 4 to 6 or maybe even early, just as soon as we can get in there. Contest acres, we're shooting for a really high yield, so we got to put some more nitrogen. So we don't put it all on up front. We like to save some of it for later, so we'll put another 15 to 20 gallon per acre drilled on with a high boy. Or another way I do it is sometimes if I'm real busy, I might have an airplane just fly on 100 pounds of urea about a week before tossel. And the reason we do that, we really want to take advantage of these hybrids that have this stay green characteristic. We don't want them running out of gas, so we give them that late season shot of nitrogen. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about foliar feeding, and here's some guidelines if you're going to do foliar feeding. I've read a lot in the last couple of years about foliar feeding and saying, we didn't see any results. Well, there's some things that you really need to do to take advantage of foliar feeding. If you go out there in the middle of the day and it's 98 degrees and foliar feed, probably not going to see any result. It's probably not going to happen. So here's some guidelines if you want to increase your chances of seeing some results from foliar feeding. One of the things you can do is spray late in the day, really late. I spray a lot of times after the sun's gone down. I may get started and I may finish up after dark. No problem. Use high pressure. You want to really get that pressure up there to fog that stuff out over the plants. Never spray above 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Never. So people knows what happens when the temperature gets hot. The plant starts closing up, trying to protect itself. So it's not going to be accepting any of that. It's not going to let the material into the plant. Ideally, if you ever find this situation, and that's probably never going to happen, but if it was 70 degrees Fahrenheit and 70% relative humidity, that would be an ideal time. That would be the best scenario you can pick, the foliar feed. And the last thing is you want to, know what your crop stages are, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But first, I want to show you this chart of when the opportune times to foliar feed. Now, this was developed by Dennis Damon. He's the guy that puts these ProAg 1 and 2 trainings on them, and he developed this chart. He lets us use it. But one of the first things you can do, starting out here about between the V1 and V2 growth stage, is to take a tissue test. And when you take it at that stage, I send all mine to Midwest Labs, is the corn plant's going to be pretty small. So if the corn plant is a foot or less taller, you just take all of the above ground parts, just cut the plant off at the ground level and get you 15 or so plants for a sample and send those into Midwest Labs. Now the first foliar feeding opportunity would be around the V3 to the V5 growth stage. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that's when the plant is determining how many rows around the corn it's going to have on that cob. So that's the reason we're going to do it. And Dennis Damon, he always says, I have people every year call me and say, well, it's already up to about the V6 growth stage. I say, is it okay if I go ahead and foliar feed it now? He says, well, you can do that, but what we'll do is add your name to that long list we've got that says I tried foliar feeding and it didn't work. So we really want to hit these windows when we foliar feed. Another opportunity, you could take another tissue test. I usually don't do it. I usually just take that first one right there. But you can take a tissue test in preparation for the next foliar feeding around the V6. Now, if you didn't get one taken that early, I would take one here. But now the corn plant's getting up there pretty good size, and you don't want to be taking 15 or 20 plants that are this tall and sending them in. So what you do is take the uppermost leaf on that plant that has a leaf collar. That's what you would take. Now, our next foliar feeding is out here between V8 and V12 growth stage. And I always like to be ready and try to hit these at the beginning of that window, because you never know if you have to get some, if you're waiting and then you get a big heavy rain or something and you can't get in there. So I always like to try to hit those stages at the beginning of that window. But you can do that next foliar feeding out there around V8 to V12. And the reason for this one is because that's when the ear is going to start determining how long it's going to be. So that's the reason we try to do it. And I like to also tell people, we're not really trying to feed the plant with these foliar feedings. All we're really, because we're not going to put very much. I only put a couple gallons of material out there. So what you're really trying to do is just stimulate that plant for it to send signals that everything's good with the world. Conditions are good because everything feels good, and it'll stimulate those roots and stuff to take up more nutrients and moisture. Now we could take another tissue test out here at R1. That would be, when the ear is silking or when the ear is just starting to form, also. And if you do that, you always take the leaf that is, well, they call it the ear leaf, but actually it's the leaf opposite and below the ear. The first leaf that is opposite and below the ear. So that's the leaf you would send in. And they're pretty big leaves now, so you wouldn't send in a whole leaf. They like where you cut about a 12-inch section or so out of the center of the leaf and just send in that center part of the leaf. Now the last foliar feeding opportunity is out here at the R2 growth stage, and that's when I want to do it. And there's a reason for that, because you can still put on your fungicide at that time, and you can combine two things at once. All right, now I'm going to talk just a little about staging a crop, tell you what stage it's in, because I got to tell you, before I got into this foliar feeding, I didn't know as much as I should have known about how to stage a crop. Okay, when staging a field of corn, each specific vegetative or reproductive stage is defined only when 50% or more of the plants in the field are in or beyond that stage. And each leaf stage is defined according to the uppermost leaf whose leaf collar is visible. So you can see, you know, it's not in the next stage if it doesn't have that leaf collar yet. So you got, that's why how we go by staging the crop by leaves. However, when the plant gets bigger, up V6 and larger, that stalk starts getting bigger, and it will tear those small leaves off. So then it gets harder to tell exactly how many leaves have a leaf collar. But another way you can actually stage a crop is split that plant right down the middle, all the way down to the very tip of the root, and then you can count how many nodes you have. The first 4 nodes are right at the tip, and they're all compressed together down there. You can't tell there's 4 there, but there is. Then your first internode, or you'll have about a 1/2 inch space there, and that is where you start counting your nodes. That would be the 5th node. Then you'll have a little bit wider space, and that would be your 6th node. And as you go up the stalk, they keep getting further apart. Then the next node would be 7, and you can go up and count how many nodes it has, and then that would be the stage the crop is in. Just put these up here. These are 2 real good publications, one on corn growth and development, and also one on soybean growth and development. They're put out by Iowa State University. A guy could go to their website, and you can find these and get you one of these. They're really good. I always keep those in my truck during the growing season, because they not only tell you, help you stage a crop, tell you how to do it, but they also tell you, now here's what's happening at different stages in the corn plant. It's using a lot of this now, certain nutrients or whatever. So they're really nice to have. Just a picture of a corn at the V3 growth stage. If you could see it real plain, and have it right here, you could actually count those collars. There would be a collar on the first 3 leaves, and even though those top leaves are big, they don't have a leaf collar yet, so they're not counted as the next stage. So that's a corn plant. It's actually at the V3 growth stage. You know, a lot of these chemicals nowadays that are, determine whether or not you can spray them. A lot of you have to spray them before a certain growth stage. So this is how you determine whether or not you need to spray certain chemicals. I don't know what they are offhand, but I do know there are chemicals that have to be sprayed. If you're going to spray them post-emerge, have to be sprayed before a certain growth stage. All right, here's my program for foliar feeding. We start out, we use a 3-18-18, same product that I put into furrow, and that's what's good. If you're using a 9-18-9 product, you can use that for foliar feeding too. This is what I have, so this is what I use. 2 gallons per acre, a 1/2 pint of boron per acre, because just like my soil test, and I don't know what it is about boron, but every tissue sample I've taken also says I'm short on boron. So we put a little boron in there. Zinc, it's kind of borderline. Sometimes the tissue test says I need some, sometimes I don't, but a 1/2 pint's not going to break the bank. I put a 1/2 pint of zinc in there. We put the foliar excital in there. That gives us that bigger leaf. We put 10 ounces per acre of that. And we add a surfactant, which is what we call rain fast, 1 ounce per 100 gallons. Now that's right, 1 ounce per 100 gallons. We don't want to go over that, so it's not very much. And I add enough water to make 8 to 10 gallons of total spray material per acre. And the only reason I add the water is, you remember I said we want to get high pressures, and I have to have enough volume there to get a high pressure. I don't want to have to keep going smaller on my tips, to get it. So we just add water to get a higher spray volume so we can get that pressure up there. And for me, I normally just use a normal 8003 tip is what I use on the sprayer. We do the same thing again at the V8 growth stage. The only difference is we do not put the foliar excital in there. That's the only difference. Just a picture of me spreading some corn there to V4 growth stage. What it looks like. Just a picture here of a plant that would be in the V8 stage. Picture of me spreading some corn there at that stage. You can tell now that's getting to be a late afternoon because it's starting to get a little dark there. Here's our last foliar feeding at this stage, what we call the white blister. It's right before any of the kernels on the cob there start turning yellow. Just got the blisters on there. Probably one of the things people will actually wait too long to do this. They're not out there checking it. They'll just get away from them. But now you can go a little later, but if you're going to add your fungicide, I'd want to do it as early as I could. So that's why I try to do it the R2 stage. And here's the program I use at that stage. We use that nitrogen product. It's a 26.05B. I use 3 gallons per acre. Dennis, I've got a question I thought about a while ago when you were talking about these products. And I don't know if you mentioned it today, the high phosphorus and the high potash fertilizers we have, like the 3-18-18, the 9-18-9, they do not mix with your regular nitrogen. Cannot mix them, they will. And I was not here all the time, but that's true. You don't want to do it. The Sidekick product you can mix with 28%. What about our nitrogen products? Well, the Feast XL, I've never done this, and I just thought of this question. Can you mix that with our 3-18-18 and 9-18-9, or do you know?
I would think you could.
I was thinking you could too.
I don't think it'd be a problem at all.
I need to ask Dennis David that.
We've done it.
You've done it?
There's no contamination.
Because sometimes you might be wanting to put a little nitrogen out there a little earlier, and this is an excellent product because this product will not burn your crop. Now, if you put a 28 or a 32 out there, you're going to burn the heck out of that crop, even at a very low rate. But this 28, it's a different form of nitrogen, and I don't know all the technology on it about what it is. It's a trizone or something like that, but it will not burn your crop. I guess you could probably put 10 gallon on it and it wouldn't burn it. But if you had a case where you wanted to foliar feed earlier and you wanted a little nitrogen and you also wanted some P and K, you could mix the two together. That was just a question. I was sitting there listening and I just thought of it. I just brought it up. But that's what we use is a 26.05B. And I doubt at that stage it would help you very much by adding any P and K because at that stage the plant has already used most of the P and K. But earlier you might want to put a little bit of nitrogen in with your 3-18-18 or 9-18-9. But basically we add the rain fast and make sure we keep this 1 ounce or less because the 26.05B I think has some rain fast in it already. And I do this, we have airplanes do this. We're far enough south, actually cotton is grown in the next county south of me. Rice is grown in the same county I'm in. They do a lot of airplane flying, so we have access to airplanes pretty readily. And they usually do that early morning. Because at this time, the corn plants and the white blister, this is probably, for us, if we get our corn planted on time, it'll start tossling about the middle of June. It'll start tossling. So time it gets to white blister, another 10 to 14 days. So we're going to be right the 1st of July. So temperatures are up there pretty high. So we usually do this at a very early morning application with the airplane because they don't like to fly after dark for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, we also add our fungicide at that same time. So we do 2 things at once. Okay, I'm getting ready to summarize everything up. Now, I talked about a lot of stuff, but I guess for me, if I had my favorites, these would be the 4 favorite products I'd have would be the Amplify LC treatment, that Wex product. And one of the reasons I like those 2 is because they're so easy to use. It doesn't cost very much. You don't have to change much in your operation, especially the Wex. I mean, all you got to do is dump that stuff in the tank. That's it. Another one that I need to add to this list is probably the manganese product, the micronutrient with glyphosate whenever you're spraying glyphosate on a crop, because that's another one. It's a big payback. All you got to do is dump it in. That's it. They're high payback. That's what Kip Colors likes to always call that low-hanging fruit, because it's easy to pick. All you got, doesn't take any extra effort, doesn't have to change anything you're doing. But another of my favorites is the starter fertilizer. I can substitute 9-18-9 there if that's what my soil test call for, and that sidekick product. We've just seen tremendous results with that also. I was at the Farm Equipment Show over at Louisville. It's been several years ago, probably 6 years ago now, and I was at a seminar that Ken Ferry was putting on, and he was talking about corn production and different things. And I never forgot this comment that he made, is that you never want to let your corn plants have a bad day. So I know I got to think about that, and that's kind of what the AgroVantage system is about, because we try to keep that corn plant from having a bad day. But starting out with the Amplify seed treatment, you know, we want to get that on there so it's got more energy to come out of that ground. We don't want it sitting in that ground in cold, wet weather and having a bad day. The next thing is, we got the starter fertilizer right there in the furrow, so as soon as those plant germinates and starts sending out those roots, it's got some fertility right there to grab a hold of. Then we got our foliar feeding program too. So I think that's basically what the Conklin AgroVantage system tries to do, is it tries to keep your plants from having a bad day. This is just, I got a few pictures here of some of our field days, but I've been real fortunate to have some of the top growers, I guess we might say the world, come to our field days. This was in 2006. For people that don't know, the person on the left is the owner of the Conklin Company, Charles Herbster. The guy next to him is Rod Livesay. He's the guy that got me started using the Conklin products, and of course everybody recognizes Francis Child. That's my son Matthew there right behind the sign. That's just a friend of ours from Kentucky, John Griffith. Where I'm at, I'm less than an hour away from Kentucky. This year and 2 years ago, we held 2 big field day events. Well, what we did, they were 2-day events, and Pioneer and Conklin teamed together. Pioneer had one day and Conklin had another. This picture over here actually came from our first field day 2 years ago. Of course, everybody recognizes the fellow in the green shirt there in front. That's Kip Colors, who holds the world's record with soybeans. That's Jay Myers. He's a farmer that works with Conklin a lot. He's had success in the state corn growing yield competition. The other guy wearing the yellow shirt is Gary Porter, a real good friend of mine. He's from northern Missouri. And then, of course, that's me behind there. But there's several national wins right there if you added them all up. Kip lives on the exact opposite side of the state. We both live down in southern Missouri, but he is right on the very west side, and I'm on the very east side. This is a picture from this year's event. Of course, that's Kip there next to me, and the gentleman next to Kip is a guy by the name of Donnie Carpenter. He's from the Texas Panhandle, just south of Amarillo. I got a story I want to tell you about him. Down there, I mean, irrigation, if they don't irrigate, they don't raise a crop at all. And he was doing a conference call, I think, with Rod Livesay and another gentleman, and the guy, you know, Donnie raises some good crops. He'll have 340, 350 bushel entries in the yield. He and Steve Albright right next to it. They live about the same area. But anyway, they was talking, and the guy was more interested about his irrigation. He said, well, how many times do you have to water that corn? And Donnie said, well, we only water it one time, that's all. So we turn it on at the beginning of the season, and we turn it off at the end of the season. We only water it one time. So I thought that was a pretty good story. And some other guys there that were at their field day. Steve Albright, they're about in the middle. He probably someday is going to break that 400. He actually, a couple years ago, he had a first check that went over 400, but you remember I said the second one's the one that's official, so the one he had to turn in was less than 400, but a couple years ago he did go over 400 on his first check. That guy up there in front, that's David Hoover. Of course, last year he had a yield of 429, and I don't know what his yield is this year. I did hear something, but it wasn't 400. I think it was a little less, but it's still way, way up there to 300, so I don't want to feel too sorry for him. At the prices he's probably getting for his corn out there in Virginia. Actually, a story about Dave. He actually farmed some of the original Jamestown colony land that the Pilgrims first farmed when they first came over here. The same ground that they farmed. So it's a couple hundred years old, so I guess we can't wear this ground out. Now, I don't know, I don't think that's where his contest corn comes from, but he does farm some of that land. And just another picture of some of us guys that are field day this year. I got one last story, and this is it. And like I said last time, for somehow I can't keep from doing something crazy every year. And this year, this might be the craziest thing I did. This was actually a cornfield that I harvested this year, and this is a bean field. We were getting ready to do our field day the 2nd and 3rd of August, and I was going to take a trip immediately after the field day, so I didn't have any time. But this was my 25 acres of dryland corn that I had that I didn't irrigate, and it was ready to shell. It was, you know, the stalks weren't very healthy. It was starting to go down. I said, well, I really need to shell this corn now, or if I wait 3 weeks, because I was going to be gone for 3 weeks. I said, I won't have nothing left here to shell. So I shelled it, and while I was shelling, the neighbor of mine there, he's a young guy, and he's always kind of egging me on anyway, so why don't we just plant that in soybeans? I said, well, I don't even have a planter because I traded planters. They got my planter because they had them sold in Australia or somewhere overseas where they need it right now. So they take them, break them down, put them in containers, and ship them overseas. And I don't get a planter until probably February anyway. He said, well, I'll use my planter. I'll plant it for you. I said, well, I don't have time if you want to do it. So these soybeans, we shelled corn in July. It was about 22% moisture. It was getting pretty dry. Now, it was planted in March. Planted these beans the first day of August, and this picture was taken the first day of November. So I don't know what they're going to do. It doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. It's not very much. But I just thought I would do something silly. I said, well, maybe if this situation ever happens again, I know I was even concerned about, you know, we put corn chemicals out there. It had hardly any rain whatsoever. The only rain I think we got was right before I shelled it. We did get a rain, and that's another reason I went ahead and planted it, because I had moisture to give them up. But I called my agronomist and I said, man, I put these chemicals, I had some atrazine. I said, without any of this rain, I said, are these beans going to come up? He said, I really don't know. So I said, well, I got the seed beans real cheap because they were treated beans, and it was that late, and they can't sell those treated beans, you know, they got to dump them. So I got those real cheap anyway. So I tell everybody this is going to be the longest year I've ever had farming. We started planting corn the 20th day of March. I finished planting the first day of August, started shelling corn in July, and I'm not going to finish harvesting until December. So appreciate everybody's attentiveness. I'm finished. I think Dennis is going to come back. Probably after he gets done, he's going to show you, I think, a few results that he had. If you've got any questions later, I'd be more than glad to answer them, or we'll be here for lunch, and if you want to talk one-on-one, we'll do that too.
Well, I got it up here. I'm going to show you that seed treater. Just a real quick video. Again, this is built by Jay Myers up in Colfax, North Dakota. You just got a Pro Box sitting on top of an empty Pro Box, and it's dropping everything into a belt conveyor that goes into his seed tender. As we come back here, what you're going to see is he's got a flue here. As it comes through, he's got to narrow down to a really narrow passageway where the seed can drop down into his hopper. Here's a nozzle that's spraying his liquid seed treatment right onto this band of seed as it comes through. You can see the seed Amplify L hitting there. And then he's got it set up so that you can adjust the flow. And then on the back side here, he's got the electric pump and the container. And again, with the liquid, you can co-apply the Amplify L and the Magnify LAI, that new biological. Those can be co-applied. When you do it that way, though, you can't do it ahead of time. You need to do it within 4 days of planting. So that's basically how his setup works. We've got some guys over in Iowa that got one of his first units last year and really loved it. And as a result, they're putting it on the LAI on every one of their acres of corn for this coming year. Just real quick, I want to talk about the Magnify LAI product. Again, it's for corn and wheat. It's a nitrogen-fixing bacteria, so in the root zone, it'll help to provide you with additional nitrogen source. Here's a good wheat grower from up in South Dakota. Jim Teen grows some seed wheat, and he was planting 90 pounds per acre. 5 ounces per 50 pounds is what he puts on as far as the Magnify LAI. His control plot was 85 bushels. Next to it was 92 bushel where he used the product, so 7 bushel yield response. Test weight was plus 0.7 pounds per bushel. And his protein content was up 1.3%. He actually tried another seed treatment this year. I don't know the name of it or anything else about it. He says he could see a visual difference on both of them. This one, though, was a positive 7 bushel. The other one was a minus 5.9 bushel. Here's our some results from around the country. I'm going to flip through these real fast because we've got lots of them, and we don't need to take time to see all of them. And we've got them all on our website. But here's in Bath, Illinois. I don't even know what part of Illinois that is. Anybody know? I'm sure it's further south than here. But 5.9 bushel on their WEX. Amplify showed about 2.86, which is on the low end of what we normally expect. Magnify LAI, that new product, was a 4 bushel yield response for about $1.25. Feast showed them a 7.17 bushel yield advantage. Here's Amplify in Hancock, Iowa. Hancock, Iowa is just across from Omaha, Nebraska, so it's clear on that side of the state. 15 bushels is what they got. Now again, this is dry land, extremely dry. 56 bushel was their control. 71 bushel where they used Amplify, 15 bushel yield response. Their Feast fertilizer gave them a 4.5 bushel where they used 6 gallons of 318-18, but where they used the 318-18 pre-blended with the Sidekick. So they get some extra sulfur in. Same number of gallons, just different formulation, showed an additional 4 bushel. With and without zinc, again, same fertilizer formulation, but with and without zinc, you got an extra 7 bushel. So if your micronutrients are short, you can see some good response from a row placement application of those. Here's with Feast, zinc, and manganese. So again, same fertilizer material. The only difference is the 2 pints of micros, pint of zinc, pint of manganese. Showed an extra 7 bushel there too. And with full system versus his control, and again, the full system consisted of all the micros as recommended, and his soil excitant, and the Amplify D. We had a plus 30.5 bushel, 86 versus 55. This is over in Missouri, Guardian and liquid nitrogen on the left, same field, and Hydrus on the right, at 80 bushel versus 68 bushel, so 12 bushel yield response there. I'm going to jump past some of these, and let's see, I'm trying to think, did we have any Magnify LAI in here? Amplify here was a 6.9 bushel, Rex was a, well, that's one that's non-repeatable, I'm sure, 27.8 bushel. Here, I don't know where Roadhouse, Illinois, anybody know where that one's at? Here with our full system, compared to their check was 79.8 bushel versus 62. And when they put on the full system, including foliar applications, they went to 105. Linnetz, PA. Here's Jay Myers. He's a 7-time state winner in North Dakota. Wex showed him an 8.5 bushel, Amplify a 5.1 bushel. Here's his magnified LAI. This is the new LAI seed treatment. 9.3 bushels, again about a $65 return for $1.15. He's compared a number of other fertilizer materials, 1034O, NutriFlow's got a product, Nature's and Feast, and you can see some significant yield differences there. Again, no Colfax. This is kind of an interesting trial here. He showed a 15.7 on his pop-up program, 204 versus 188. They had some pretty decent moisture up there. But here, look at this. This was his recommended rate. 5 gallons of 918.9, a gallon of Sidekick, a pint of manganese, and a pint of zinc. Nice 20.8 bushel yield improvement, 204 versus 188. Sometimes people figure, well, if a little bit's good, a lot would be better, right? So what he did is he doubled everything. 10 gallons of pop-up, 2 gallons of Sidekick, 2 pints of manganese, 2 pints of zinc, and his yield went down 3 bushel. All right, we recommend you stick with the recommended rates, what's in there. We've tested our fertilizer materials all the way up to like 20 gallons per acre in furrow. We don't see a reduction in plant stand, we just don't see the payback. Once you get over 5-6 bushel, gallons per acre in furrow, that's kind of the optimum rate of return. I want to throw this one in because, as Jerry talked about, our Sidekick will mix. Our high phosphate fertilizer will not mix with a lot of other materials. It won't mix with nitrogen. But our Sidekick will mix with a variety of products. It will mix with our products, it will mix with liquid nitrogen, it will mix, in this case, with 1034O. With 1034O as their program, I'm not sure how many gallons they're talking about here, but they've got 101 bushel per acre over in Sauk City, Minnesota, where they used 1 gallon of Sidekick. They picked up an extra 17 bushel. And again, I wouldn't expect that much every year, but 5-6 bushel is very common for a $6.55 investment, and it will mix in there just fine. Patience and resolve is what we all have to have. We have to remember that the day we drop the seed in the ground is the day that we have the maximum genetic potential. And anything that's going to happen from there is going to be stress that's going to reduce or drag that yield down. So whatever those things are, whether it's weather or lack of weather, pests, low pH, we're going to get some percentage of that program. Dennis Damon is our agronomist that does our training programs, our Pro Ag 1 and Pro Ag 2, and he'll be in Fitchburg, Wisconsin a week from next Tuesday. It'll be the week after Thanksgiving on Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll be there for our Pro Ag 1 program. It's the only one we have in Wisconsin. We have about 30 of them around the country, but Denny will be there for that program. So if you or anybody you know would benefit from being there, I don't know that we have done anything here. Most states will give CCA credits for it. But in this program, we start like on Tuesday about 10 o'clock, and we end the next day at about 3 o'clock. So Denny's the guy that's put together these foliar feeding charts. That's one of the things he'll be covering at those programs, and Jerry's gone through that. The key things that I think that we offer the marketplace and producers is, number one, we do have some unique products and production technologies, but a lot of companies have, some great products. But I think the educational programs are what we do better than anybody else. In our Pro Ag 1 program, we offer, like I said, about 30 of those around the country. This will be the only one in Wisconsin. We do offer a Pro Ag 2 program. There's just one of those offered a year, and that's going to be January 21 and 22 in Omaha, Nebraska. This one is what I call an agronomic intensive, where for 2 days you talk about how does a corn, soybean, wheat, alfalfa plant grow, and how do we get on the good side of how Mother Nature makes that process work. And so that 2-day Pro Ag 1 program is really an agronomic intensive on applied agronomy. The Pro Ag 2 is a soil science. So it's all about understanding your soil tests, understanding the process, and then helping people to make recommendations based on that. And then number 3 is, because of the first 2, we have developed this network of top agronomist producers around the country that we work together all the time, including guys like Jerry. So we have a DVD if you're interested in getting a copy of it. It's of the field day that was held at Jerry's farm here this last August 3rd. We'd be glad to get you a copy of that. We also have a resource CD on all of our products that show you how to apply those in different applications, and a video called Breaking the 300 Bushel Corn Yield Barrier, which is a lot of the material that you heard this morning. We have our next program after Madison here, or Pittsburgh, is going to be in Lincoln. We've got the program there the very next 2 days, Thursday and Friday. We also have offered through from John Deere Farm Plan of 2.25% financing through the end of this year on inputs for 2013, and that is on their special terms program that goes through the end of the year. I encourage people to consider, I explain it this way: Amplify, Magnify, Guardian, Wax, Excito, and Feast are products that each individually will produce some good results in an operation, but they're really designed to work together as a full production system. And so what I encourage people to do, rather than kind of pick and choose and try a little bit of this and a little bit of that, I encourage people to take 80 acres and just run what I call the 80-acre challenge, and take and apply the full system to one piece of ground and to compare that to the rest of their farming operation. And it's going to take some things that you're going to have to do to make that happen, but it really, I think, lets you see what the best possible results are with that program. I started with my top 10 things you ought to know. Number 10 is that we work direct with you. Our whole objective is to help provide personalized service so that you can be more productive, efficient, and profitable in whatever you're doing with our products. So with that.
All right, well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today, seeing a little bit more about the AgroVantage system, seeing what we're doing here on our farm, and maybe something that we can do with you to coordinate with you and help you on your farm. I got started with the company in 2007 and haven't looked back since. Large part, and the reason why that is because of this guy right here. Rod Livesay has helped us with our operation, and he's helped me with my own business. So here we are.
Thank you, Preston. Welcome, everyone. I'm a senior director with the company. I've been with the company since 1992. Luckily, I started when I was 12 years old, so that worked out fairly well to have a long career with them. I want to thank Preston for hosting this today and doing the work to have us ready to go and do a field day. As we go through here, we're just going to take it. It's interactive. Feel free to ask questions, do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to be able to talk super loud, so don't get too far away. As we go to our different field days, and we've had a bunch of them this year within the company, well over 30, it's really neat to see the response to the products across all different environmental conditions. We have some of our guys who are harvesting corn this year, even with the drought, making over 300. We have other people who are harvesting corn that are not going to make it to 100. And so we're seeing the differences in all of these different conditions as we march through the fall here. Every plot that we do, we start out with isolation, and I believe that's what we have here on these first two. Am I correct, Preston? Is it's just a buffer zone to protect us from temperature differences, wind differences, chemical drift, and those kinds of things. We'll move on down. The first replication is 5 gallon of Feast 31818 with 1 gallon of our 002517, which is a product we call Feast Sidekick. When we put these together in the ratio of 5 to 1, it actually comes from the company as a blend that is 2, 15, 19, 3% sulfur. And we've had this product for several years, using it this way, and the reason is quite simple. As we work throughout the United States, over the last 20 years, we have watched the need for sulfur take off like a rocket ship. The fact of the matter is, guys, that in all of the tests that I have looked at over the last year, we have not found a test that didn't require sulfur. 20 years ago, the average test that I looked at would require 4 pounds. That was pretty typical. Last year, that average test was needing 24 pounds. Why is that? There's lots of reasons. We've went to a cleaner type of diesel fuel, so we get less emissions. We've put a lot of scrubbers in the smokestacks and industry, so we really are getting rid of the acid rain, which is perhaps better for the environment, but it's definitely not better for the grower. A nutrient that you used to get for free out of groundwater is now costing you, and you're going to have to replace it. When we place nutrients in the soil, most of the nutrients that we place have a positive charge, whereas the soil has a negative charge. That's why we call it the ground. Can someone here tell me, give me the name, give me one nutrient that is negatively charged? In other words, has the same charge as the soil that we're standing on. And this is important that we know these. Free gift for whoever will take a stab at it. Pretty good, huh? Yeah, there you go. If the guy that wins it is from Nebraska, I'll throw it with the blade out. If he's from Iowa, I'll throw it with the blade in. How's that? Is that reasonable? There you go. When we're out applying nutrients, guys, it's important to remember that nitrogen, sulfur, and boron are negatively charged. And that's important to you because that means that they have to be reapplied every year. They won't stay in the soil. Phosphorus, zinc, potassium, all of those are positively charged, so they are attracted to the soil. We can hang on to those. But it's important to know that when we start getting out of nitrogen, out of sulfur, and out of boron, we have to reapply every year. And so consequently, we end up really needing that. And honestly, we need a lot more sulfur than we get here. This is just a beginning. We also want to see a guy using ammonium thiosulfate when he applies his 28 or his 32, or doing some kind of supplemental sulfur to get enough in here. Sulfur needs to be available at a ratio of 1 unit of sulfur for every 10 units of nitrogen. If we don't abide by that, we cheat ourselves out of a lot of yield. There are a lot of different starters out there, and I want to give you guys this disclaimer. Everything I say tonight, I speak only for Conklin products. I don't know how other products are going to react. I don't know what's going to happen when you use something else. And specifically, I'm going to make recommendations on different analysis, and I recommend that we stay away from some analysis. And the reason for that is this. As we start looking at these guys who are getting higher and higher up the yield curve, one of the things we find very important is this K. We have growers that we work with who have very high naturally occurring K levels, and yet they still use a 318-18. You would think they would gravitate towards an 820-40, but the reason that they don't is that they know plant available K early on is super important. There was a test that was done at Purdue, but it was published on the University of Nebraska's website out of Lincoln. And the short version of that test, it's a 90-some page abstract, and it can be summarized in one graph. I don't know why they didn't do that first, but on the last page, it talked about the difference in uptake. When you harvest this field, Preston, you're going to remove somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of a pound of potassium with every bushel of corn. That never changes. If it's 100 bushel, you're going to take away about 25 to 33 pounds. If it's 200 bushel, you're going to take away 50 to 66. But the uptake changes drastically. The test that they ran showed conclusively that to move from 175 bushel yield goal to 250 bushel yield goal, while you're only increasing your yield about 50%, you're increasing your K uptake over 100%. And if you don't have that plant available K early on, you don't get those higher yields. This is one of the limiting factors that's really hurting people, is if they don't have enough potassium available early. And we need to remember that plant available potassium is only available at a soil temperature of about 65 degrees. How many of you guys are going to wait for the soil temperature to be 65 to plant? Nobody? Really? This year, everybody got all nervous. I mean, we saw people planting way earlier than we ever have. Some guys, you know, moving by as much up as a month. And even though the weather was conducive to doing that, the soil temperature wasn't 65 degrees, I can assure you. Let's move on down.
I believe this was planted on May 12th.
Okay.
And the nitrogen program for the test plot was 28% liquid. It was a high pressure roller coulter.
Okay. How many pounds?
140 pounds.
Was there Guardian with that?
Yes.
Guardian to stabilize it at 1/4 to the acre. Okay. And then, do you know what population you planted at?
It's about 35,000.
Okay, and the hybrid?
This is Pioneer's 33W80.
Okay, 33W80 Pioneer. And that would be the same across the entire plot, right?
The whole field.
Because we want the differences to be attributable to differences in nutrition, so we never change hybrids going across our plot. Want to make sure that we only have one change. So the difference between this and that would be 6 gallon of the 215-19-3, correct?
Yeah.
Very good. And as we move down here, what he did was he took that 6 gallon of 215-19-3 and we added how much zinc to it, Preston?
1 pint.
So we added 1 pint of zinc. What do your soil tests call for zinc here?
Yes, that is the key.
Step in here and let's talk about that. I know you're carrying that just for a cane. Why do you? What is that?
This is a soil probe, and this is the key. This gives you your road map. You know, you look at a road map and you always say, okay, well, this is where we want to go. You got to know where you're at in order to be able to get there. So you got to do a soil test and figure out what your soil has in it and what it's capable of, so that you can know what you shoot for your yield goal.
I tell everyone that one of the things that makes me nervous is people who practice what I call voodoo agronomics, where they just want to walk across your farm, Delmer, and say, oh, I think it needs this. Or sometimes we call it the laying of hands agronomy. I don't believe in that kind of agronomy. Guys, it is really important that we run a full soil test. You were with me at the plot tour we did last Thursday.
Yes.
In Lisbon. There was a young man there, and I shared the fact that he farms about, I think, 2,800 acres. And when he came to his first meeting, I said, please bring me your soil test. And he brought me 1 sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11. Now, he's been getting a free soil test forever. And I would suggest to you guys that a free soil test is just about worth what you're paying for it, okay? Our soil tests are 22 bucks a piece. And the fact of the matter is, we're not just looking at NP and K. What Darren had, what that young man had, was not a soil test. It didn't show any analytical work. It didn't show the phosphorus levels. It didn't show the potassium levels. It didn't show the micronutrients or the secondary nutrient levels. It didn't show cation exchange capacity or organic matter or base saturations. It didn't show anything. It was a sheet that said, on this field, load this much P and this much K. It wasn't a soil test, Shannon. It was a loadout sheet, literally. That's all it was, and that's all they gave him. And so consequently, a guy has to realize that we got to get a complete soil test. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to incentivize you guys to do the right thing. For being here tonight, the company will pay for 4 tests for you. Make sure that you hit that sign-in sheet, put your information down, and Preston or whoever invited you will be working with you, that you can see what these tests are like. And then we're going to strongly encourage you to soil test your entire operation so that we can make good decisions. Preston, you have multiple fields.
Yes.
Do you do exactly the same thing in every field?
No.
Why not?
Because that's not what the soil test calls for.
So some have a different micronutrient need than others. Some have a different rate of need for the amounts of fertilizer.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure we're doing exactly what each field needs, a prescription application, if you will. Zinc is a common micronutrient that guys put in. It has many functions within the plant, and we want to make sure that we have adequate zinc levels in order to get translocation of phosphorus, among other things. And so a lot of guys will know that they need this, but we want to make sure that we're testing for it and actually confirming it and applying it only as needed. We'll move on down. Manganese is a micronutrient that when we first started, very few people needed. I'm not going to get into the big debate over why we've seen the manganese need go up. I'll let you work on that yourself, or at another meeting we'll talk more about it. But the fact of the matter is, it has taken off, and we need a lot more manganese. We've had the pleasure of doing a lot of field days this year and getting to talk to a lot of really good growers. Guys that we thoroughly enjoy spending time with, guys that teach us a bunch. And one of the things that they all will talk about is the fact that if they're spraying glyphosate, they're spraying manganese with it. Because a pint of manganese, of our manganese, in with glyphosate can make some significant differences in yield in both soybeans and corn. And so consequently, sometimes the soil tests are such that we have to put it in the soil as well as foliar apply it to get where we need to be with it. Again, another micronutrient that's very, very important. How many of you guys here have ever seen someone spray a field, and after they sprayed it in 8 to 10 days, their soybeans turn kind of Hawkeye yellow, is what we call it. Yeah, exactly. So you're familiar with that. And so the fact of the matter is, what happens is we need more manganese. Manganese is responsible, has a lot to do with photosynthesis. And so when we start seeing how that shakes out and the results of not having it, we start to lose yield pretty quickly. And when we start taking a look at how these top end guys do everything, I think Jerry Cox sums it up best. He says that he wants his corn plant or his bean plant to never have a bad day. He wants every day to be a good day. And so we want to make sure that we're meeting that nutritional need and all of the nutritional needs. You know, the fact of the matter is, most of us really like ice cream. But if all we ever ate was ice cream, we wouldn't do very well. And we definitely would not want to feed our little ones a pure ice cream diet. They would become sick very quickly. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're meeting all the nutritional needs of this plant just like we would any other growing living thing. And manganese is one of those that we have a heavy, heavy need for that's getting ignored in a lot of applications. We want to make sure that we're doing what that soil test calls for. Let's move on down. In this last application, you added soil excido into the mix. 10 ounces per acre, applied in furrow with everything else. Soil excido is a product that is a plant growth regulator. Now, this is a plant growth regulator that carries an EPA registration number, which makes it highly different than most plant growth regulators. Because we get a consistent result, we can provide the efficacy data to get that label because we show consistent results on everything from alfalfa to zucchini. It's going to increase fruit set. It's going to make a difference in your crop yields. This is the last product in our arsenal that you reach for. As I travel and I do meetings, people are continuously looking for the silver bullet. Ladies and gentlemen, I would love to have some product that I could sell you that was the answer. I wish, Delmer, that I had a product that I could just sell you a gallon per acre and it'd get you 100 bushel extra yield. I can assure you if I had that product, I wouldn't be standing here tonight talking to you, okay? The fact of the matter is there are no silver bullets. Guys climb up the yield curve by finding out what the right things are and then doing all of them. And this is what we reach for after we have addressed our N management, after we have addressed our phosphorus and potassium needs, after we have addressed the calcium needs in the soil, after we have addressed managing the secondaries and the micros, after we have taken care of things like boron and sulfur and manganese and zinc. Because when we do this, this is an extract product, the active ingredients are cytokinins. It's going to make cells divide faster. You're going to get a bigger root mass. You're going to get a broader leaf. And you're going to increase nutrient uptake. You're going to increase water uptake. And you're going to increase photosynthesis. So you increase fruit set. But it will not cover up or take care of other deficiencies. And so we want to do everything else correctly first and then reach for this. Did you use Amplify on your seed?
Yes.
So the entire plot had Amplify on it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Amplify is, what it does, and why you use it?
Amplify is a seed emergence aid. We use the dry. It's a seed box treatment. It's easier to, because we use bag seed and we have so few of acres, we don't need that many bags, so it just works out easy for us that way. But it helps the corn come up more even. You get a more even stand, you get more plants to the acre. We've been doing tests here on our farm for since we started with the company. It's one of the easiest products to try, and it proves itself, and then you come back and you want more information and you want to try other things.
There was a gentleman here who said he used Amplify for the first time this year. What were the results that he was seeing?
Anywhere from 1 to 6,000
additional corn plants per acre.
Yes.
Incredible. That's awesome. So everything that we do is geared towards driving additional roots. Amplify helps emergence. The adenosine monophosphate is an energy source that boots the seed up out of the soil, but it also boots the roots and gets us more roots. The Wex product that we use, not only does it work as a great surfactant, but it also drives root mass. the starter, and the zinc are all root enhancers. And so we want to make sure that we're giving that plant every advantage that we can. How many of you would agree that this has been somewhat of a challenging year? Man, March came and we thought we had it made, right? Most beautiful March we'd ever had. We were off to the races. Everything went in perfect. And that was where perfect ended for most of us. And so anything that we could do to give that plant a little advantage made a big difference. We're seeing significant differences due strictly to root mass because of the question was, could we get deep enough to get into moisture or not? I have no idea what next year is going to be like. I know it'll have its own set of challenges and they may be totally different than this, but there will be some. But I do know this, I've been doing this for 20 growing seasons, and in 20 growing seasons I've never seen a year where less root mass was better. I've never seen a year where we were better off, Dennis, to say, no, we don't need any additional roots. Whether it affects standability, whether it affects nutrient uptake, whether it affects moisture availability, whatever it is. If for nothing else, it's important because it'll increase organic matter in the soil. And so everything we do is geared towards that. And you know what? Some guys are just kind of slow. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Does anyone know, a question for you here, how many freshmen at the University of Nebraska does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is they don't let them do it. That's a 400 level class, okay? So, you know, sometimes we're a little bit slower. And what we see is that guys want to study it and they want to look at it and they want to think about it. We are in unprecedented times. Corn's over $8 a bushel. Beans over $17. And Jay, I'm not a marketing guru, but I'm going to give everybody a little marketing tip here, okay? Sell some. In my experience, we have sold more corn for less than 5 than we have over 9, okay? I'm just going to point that out to you. That statistically speaking, your odds are way better at under 5 than they are over 9. Soybeans, we've sold a lot more for under 8 than we have over 19. Don't get too greedy here. Don't get too hung up in the old way, in trying to hang on to what we're doing. You know, don't try to think that, oh, that's a 400 level class, because guys, making changes is not a 400 level class. It should be a freshman level class, and everybody should make some every year. Everyone should try something. Everyone should try to figure out how they can do better. As you guys go home and you get ready to, you're either into harvest or really getting close to getting into harvest, I hope when you're riding that combine that you're riding around saying, man, how can I improve my bottom line $50 an acre next year? What is my plan for doing that? What do I need to tweak? What do I need to do? And if you don't have an answer to that, you need to spend some time thinking about it. And we challenge you that you can do that here. I'm going to encourage you guys, take advantage of the soil testing. Use it, do it, take a look at what it calls for. I'm going to encourage you guys to get with the person who brought you here and talk about whatever you saw that was of interest. It was very much, I guess, entertaining almost to me Thursday night, because I was supposed to be the one doing the plot tour, Delmer, but yet the growers who'd been with us 2 or 3 years had already hit that stage where things are really starting to take off for them. And so most of the time what I do is I would ask a question and just kind of step back, and these 3 farmers in particular would talk about what they were seeing and what was happening and how different their stuff looked compared to the neighbors. And when you start seeing that, you know, I've heard Dennis talk many times about, you know, you got to not only do the right thing, but you got to do things right. And you want to do that here. Figure out what the right thing is and then do it to the best of your abilities. And you can do that with this. I'm going to encourage you guys that there are going to be some 2-day agronomy trainings. Dennis, are we going to have an agronomy training in Kansas City in November?
1st and 2nd.
Okay, November 1st and 2nd will be your first opportunity down the road here a ways in Kansas City. And I'm going to encourage you, if you haven't been through that you need to go through it. these top end growers that we work with, they do that, you know, and we can stand here and share with you and put you on the phone with guys. We can talk till 10 o'clock tonight with different growers that have been through it, and they'll tell you what kind of results that they get as a result of doing that. So with that, Preston, is there anything else that you'd like to add here?
No, I'd say it all starts with the Pro Ag and the soil test. You got to know where you're at, figure out where you're going. And, the Pro Ag classes are phenomenal. Everybody that I've worked with that has been through the program, and myself included, always pick up something every time I go through. And I've been to 7 or 8 of them, and I still pick up stuff going through it.
There you go. That's exactly right. We have a lot of guys that go every year, so it makes a big difference.